On the third day of the march, Algirdas rode at the head of the army with the rebel commanders, Bron, Arodus, Tolaz, Tor Owen, Timund, Edric and Robin, whilst Mark was scouting ahead. They were nearing the village of Palm Stream, when Algirdas saw Mark riding toward him. His horse Tris was riding fast with a fury. "Uncle! Uncle, you must halt the march." Without any second thoughts, he raised his arm. "Halt," he commanded. Stretching for a few miles, the army was halted. "Ruguria's Warlano army is on the other side of these woods," said Mark. 15,000 men, asked Algirdas. "Yes, 15,000. "What is your order, uncle?" asked Mark. Algirdas looked at the road ahead to the town and then at the woods. "They will have left nothing to chance. I want to end this war, and I want to end it by the end of this moon. But I won't waste the lives of my company, nor will I charge headfirst into a trap. We keep marching. We must not be drawn into battle." "That's what they want," Algirdas replied before turning to his commanders. "I want all our forces in tight formations and to keep a watchful eye on the woods. Pass the order. You are being paid to crush the infidels and invaders. So, fight." "That's what you came to do," snapped Jalabaxho. "Why don't you go and lead the attack? We'd march straight into a trap of their making, Prince Jalaba. Now, I am in command of this army and you will do as I command." Algirdas furiously replied. The once exiled prince of the Red Flower Vale shut his mouth. "Continue the march," Algirdas shouted to Bron. Algirdas kept his hands on Antler and Forked Fury as they continued to march on the road to Palm Stream. "Come on! Come on! Where in the seven hells are you?" Algirdas wondered quietly as he looked around the woods, almost willing the enemy to make their move and attack. "Shields! Shields!" Algirdas looked around and saw arrows being shot at them. He held up his shield. His arm shook as 2 arrows struck into the shield. He dared to peek aside from the shield. He saw the enemy army. There were thousands of them, all lined up. They had archers in the front of the army, shooting at them. Infantry were assembled behind them and with cavalry slowly approaching from the flanks and riding toward them. "They want their archers to keep us standing here with our shields up so that their cavalry can smash into us and then have their infantry finish us off. Prepare to charge!" Algirdas shouted. "But, uncle, you said if we did that, we would fall into a trap," shouted Robin. "This is the trap. But we are about to turn it around on them," said Algirdas as he drew Antler and rode to the front of his men. "Men! These cowards think they can surprise and defeat us. But when this day is done, they will know better than to ambush Storm Company like the fucking cowards they are. Charge!" Algirdas roared as he charged his horse straight towards the enemy archers. They stared at the charging cavalry and infantry in a panic. Algirdas chopped Antler across at the neck of a crossbowman. He smiled at watching his head fly from his shoulders before he eviscerated a man whom tried to block the blow with his crossbow. Antler's Valyrian steel blade only sliced through his crossbow like a knife through parchment. His horse rode directly into 2 men, knocking them down before he drew Forked Fury as he dropped his shield and charged into the infantry shield wall. Forked Fury beheaded a man with a light swipe as Algirdas stabbed another with Antler. He sliced and smashed both his weapons on infantry surrounding him as more of his men came charging at the enemy army. Algirdas climbed down from his horse, impaling a sellsword with Antler and burying Forked Fury in the skull of another as he did so. Another came running at him with a sword. Algirdas ducked under his slice at his throat. Then he grabbed his sword-wielding arm with his hands and snapped it back, hearing the painful sound of bones crunching. He threw him behind him before drawing his weapons out of the men he killed. He used Forked Fury to block an overhead blow of a sellsword as he rained an axe onto him. As he blocked it with Forked Fury, Algirdas stabbed him in the heart with Antler. He cut down another before he could hear a war horn blare. "Retreat! Retreat! Fall back!" He laughed as the enemy began to retreat in full force. "That's right, run, you fucking cowards!" Algirdas roared as he lifted both his weapons up high for them all to see. He turned to see his army cheer. Storm Company laughed and cheered as they ran. But the men of the Summer Isles roared and cheered with patriotic vigor at seeing the hated army of Ruguria flee. Bellinora v. In Lotus Point, people were running onto the streets and cheering. After less than 2 years of being subjected to the tyranny of Agios Rugaria, the end of his reign was in sight. Less than half of his entire army had been crushed and he had lost Lotus Point and all of Warlano to the surprise attack of the Summer Isles army and their sellsword allies, Storm Company. In her family's estate, Bellanora gave thanks to all the gods for at last bringing salvation to the Summer Isles and to her people. Bellanora, mother and father were eagerly awaiting for Xharo to come. Bellanora was eagerly awaiting his stories on fighting the army of Rugaria and killing his men. Bellanora dressed herself in her favorite dress. A burgundy-colored dress of thin linen and beaded shoulder straps. It was her favorite because she had made it herself, the very first she had made when she was 3 and 10. Xharo had personally braved the waters of the Indigo Straits to pick tiny pearls for the beads. Bella. He is here. Father called from the hallway. Bellanora made her way downstairs and to the front door. A servant opened the door and Bellanora smiled when she saw her brother standing on the doorway. But then she beamed, not for her brother, but for the handsome West AOC man at his side. Mother. Father, said Xharo. He ran up to mother and father and hugged both of them. Xharo turned to Bellanora and hugged her and kissed her forehead. I told you I'd be back, didn't I, he said. You did, brother. Thank the gods you are safe, she said. Ah, it's not the gods you must give thanks to. It is this man, he replied before gesturing to his companion. This is Lord Algirdas of House Baratheon of the Stormlands and captain of Storm Company, he introduced before gesturing to his family. Lord Algirdas, this is my father, Malqualtel, my mother, Chandela, and my sister Bellanora, he introduced. This is Algirdas Baratheon. I was expecting him to be a great big bear of a man, like his brother Robert, the demon of the trident whom smashed Rhaegar Targaryen in. But truthfully, I'm not complaining. He is very handsome and dashing. Welcome, Lord Baratheon. It is an honor to welcome you to our home, said father. My thanks, Lord Summers, he replied before he shook father's hand. Gods, I haven't had a good fuck with a man in a long time. I would love to share my bed with him. And I would be giving thanks to both him and to the gods whilst doing it, Bellanora thought naughtily as father led Xharo and the legendary Stormborn warrior into the dining hall. Will you join us for dinner, Lord Baratheon, asked father. That is very kind of you, Lord Summers. I would be honored, he replied with an uneasy smile. Bellanora could see on his smile that he looked worried. As they ate dinner, Bellanora enjoyed listening to Xharo's stories of fighting at the Great Battle of Palm Stream. And Lord Algirdas gave the order to charge. I followed after him and rode down a lancer with my own lance. I cut my arrow down on another lancer and then threw my dagger at another. They had been shooting at us and preparing to charge at us, that they hadn't at all considered that we would charge at them. And after nearly 10 minutes of fighting, they had all retreated, screaming as they did so, he regaled. By then, father, mother and Xharo were drunk on the stories Xharo was telling them and on Dornish red wine. Bellanora turned to Algirdas Stormborn when she saw he looked eager to leave. Would you like to return to your men now, my lord, she asked. That is kind, thank you, my lady, he replied. My lady? Are you trying to make me blush? Your brother tells me that it was your plan to trick Rugaria into sailing for Umbaru, he said as they walked down the hall from the dining room. It was, she replied. Very clever. I don't think even I would have thought of that, he commented. Since he conquered the Isles, I had begun a network of spies across the Isles. They provided a lot of information. And so, when the time came, I had them all spin the tale of you sailing for Umbaru, she explained. But please, Lord Algirdas. Call me Bellanora, she said with a salacious smile. Bellanora, he said with a smile. It's a beautiful name. Well, you may call me Algirdas, he replied. I think I shall. And yours, it sounds like a warrior's name. As is your nickname, Stormborn. Were truly born in a deadly storm, she asked. I was. And 3 days later, that same storm caused my parents' ship to crash into the rocks. My mother died trying to save me, he replied. Gods, that was stupid. I shouldn't have said that, she thought as she saw the sad frown on his face at talking about it. Forgive me, Algirdas. I didn't mean to upset you, she said. That's all right. Thank you, he replied as they walked to the front door. She opened the door and Algirdas frowned yet again. This time, he was looking around at the people, all celebrating with drink, food and dancing. Does this bother you, Algirdas? She asked. The war to set your country has only just begun. You would think that it has already been won, he replied as he crossed his large and muscular arms. You've given them hope, Algirdas. For the first time in less than 2 years, they have hope that we shall be free. Free to live our lives again and not be forced to follow a foreign religion or a foreign culture. Another year, and we would have been forced to speak Valyrian, she said. True, but Rugaria will know by now of the deception and that we are in Lotus Point. He will come, and with a large army. I want to end this war for the Summer Isles, and I want to end it by the end of this moon. My brothers are all dead, my homeland is being threatened by 3 kingdoms of Westeros, and my niece and nephew are trapped and being threatened with death by Cersei Lannister, he replied angrily. Gods, I forgot about his brothers. I'm sorry about your brothers, she said. He nodded before turning to her. You said that you have a network of spies at your disposal. I do. Do you have any amongst Rugaria's army? A few, she replied after thinking about it. Have them tell you when and where Rugaria will be returning to Wallano. Once we know, then we can prepare a welcome for him and send him to hell, he replied, his sadness of his family and his country long since gone. I will, she said, glad to see him full of life and eager for battle. It cannot be easy for him. His family and his home are under threat from enemies of House Baratheon and the Stormlands. And yet here he is, fighting for the freedom of a country he had set foot on for the first time less than a week ago. But here he is, fighting to free us from Rugaria. May the gods of the Summer Isles and the 7 gods of Westeros watch over him, both here and when he returns to protect his family and his country. Notes. Battle of Palm Stream is based on the Battle of Arsuf, between King Richard the Lionheart of England and Sultan Salah ad-Din Yusuf ibn Ayyub of the Ayyubid Sultanate. Chapter 47, Caught Unawares. Chapter Text. Robar 7. I don't see why they would give the command of the Crown Lands reinforcements to a man who has never fought in battle or war before, Robar thought as he looked down from the hills on the outskirts of the Brindlewood. Harold commanded the army of the Vale to track down the Crown Lands army of 15,000 reinforcements. Harold had left 5,000 men to join the Riverlands army that was guarding the route to the Westerlands to prevent the Lannisters and their Tyrell allies from protecting their country from the Northern Army and the Golden Company. So, they were matched man for man in numbers against the Crownlanders, whom had finished gathering their troops from around the Crownlands at the Antlers and were now making their way to Duskendale. And now, they had the element of surprise on them. Gods, just how stupid is Barman Byrch? Ander wondered as they looked down from their hill on the vanguard of the Crownlands army charging at a force of Knights of the Vale, sworn to House Waynwood. Are you complaining, brother? He's left his flanks unguarded and the rest of his army don't look ready to counter a surprise attack, Robar pointed out. No, but even so. How is it that they gave the command of this army to a fucking glory-obsessed idiot, he wondered. Well, if he survives this, maybe we'll humble him and he shall gain wisdom, Robar suggested, at which Ander chuckled and shook his head. Robar climbed onto his horse alongside Ander and they rejoined the rest of their knights alongside father. Now they awaited Harold's signal. So, now that Aegon is forming his own Kingsguard, are you going to join it? Ander asked. I shall, said Robar without hesitation. With knights such as Arthur Dayne, Oswell Went and Barristan Selmy to look up to and learn from, it would be an honor. In spite of Aes the mad-murdering Uncle Kyle, a man whom Robar had never met, Robar knew that Aegon was not a madman, not like his paternal grandfather or his father. Some might say that Aegon will be mad like his grandfather or even his father, said Ander. They might. But having met him, I can say that Ned Stark has raised him to be a good and honorable young man, a great warrior and one whom is dedicated to his duty and would think little of the finer things in life as opposed to doing what is expected of him, replied Robar. The brothers were interrupted when they heard the signal. As high as honor, was shouted from the valley below. Harold was leading his own detachment of knights to flank Barman Byrch and his vanguard. Get ready, men. To your positions, commanded father as he unsheathed Lamentation from his scabbard and held it up. Robar never failed to be awed by how the grey Valyrian steel blade glowed dazzlingly in the sunshine. The knights of the Vale sworn to house Royce followed Father, Ander and Robar as they rode to the hill's edge. Robar looked down at the surprised Crownlanders, all looking around with puzzlement and confusion. Lances. Charge! Father commanded. Robar took up his lance from Galadon and aimed it down at the Crownland soldiers standing and being given a grand and grandiose speech from their commander. Charge! Shouted Father. Father, really? It's rude to interrupt when someone is speaking, Robar thought with a smirk as he charged down the hill towards the surprised infantrymen, whose heads all turned to the oncoming Knights of the Vale. Against the Knights of the Vale, they stood no chance, Robar thought as his horse closed the distance between the infantry as they were being ordered to get into position. Spears and shields. Spears and shields. Too late, fool. Robar's lance impaled into 3 infantrymen before he drew his sword and sliced the throat of a man, no older than Galadon, trying to thrust his spear at Ander's horse. Robar stabbed another as his horse ran through a line of spearmen. 4 men were knocked down by the charge whilst Robar cut down onto the helm of a soldier trying to stab at his leg with a sword. Robar's blow carved his skull open and he collapsed to the ground before Robar turned to a spearman trying to throw a spear at Father's horse. Robar cut at his neck, slicing his head half off whilst Father chopped a fat knight in half, whom wore the colours of House Byrch on his tabard. Was that Barman Byrch? Why did they give the command of this army to a man whom has never fought in a battle or a war before? Robar looked at the other side of the valley, to see the infantry charging down to face the rest of the infantry. Robar then heard a shout of "Hear our roar!" He turned to see a large group of knights riding towards them under the banner of the Lannisters. Robar turned to Father. Father! Knights coming at us, he yelled. Father turned and saw the knights he pointed at. Father turned his horse around and led Robar, Ander and some of his knights. Charge, he commanded. Robar charged towards them, wielding his sword around as he rode. He raised his sword above his helm and cut his sword across at the breastplate of the first knight. The blow knocked him down from his horse, but didn't kill him, it only dented his breastplate. Robar turned and another knight thrusted his sword at him. Robar deflected the thrust with his shield and proceeded to stab him in the gorget. His sword broke the gorget and he coughed and spat blood before Robar withdrew his sword. He next faced a very tall and muscular knight, whom wore the colours of House Kettleback on his tabard. Robar blocked 2 blows from his sword before he bashed the pommel of his sword against his helm. The Kettleback knight angrily swung his sword blindly at Robar before Robar stabbed him through his exposed neck. When the knights began to rout, Robar looked around to see the battle was over. What was left of the reinforcements from all around the Crownlands were retreating. Robar lifted high his sword and cheered alongside Ander and Father. Another glorious victory for you, brave men of the Vale. Robar turned and cheered as he saw Harold lifting his blooded sword up high. Arin! 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 Valuman and mountain clansmen were chanting as they saw the Lord of the Uri. When Robar looked around at the mountain clansmen and saw how they cheered and celebrated victory alongside the lowlander Valuman, Robar was impressed. Harold and Daenerys did a great thing, in uniting our peoples together. One wouldn't think that last year we were their sworn enemies. Robar felt proud of his friend whom was now his liege lord. He is a great warrior and leader of the Vale. He has a good and wise mother and a beautiful and kind wife. He'll be a good father to his little Roland, he thought as he remembered how excited he was when he received the news that Daenerys had given birth to a son. Interlude XXI, Photo Maxi Iglesias, Photo Maxi Iglesias, Photo 84-185, Sensacini.com. Ulrich Stark, Maxi Iglesias. The chance discovery of the hidden goat path was incredible. Ulrich was in disbelief when Theon suddenly asked where are the direwolves going. Ulrich looked and saw Frostclaw, Grey Wind, Sharp, Summer and Nymeria sniffing at around the nearby hill until they discovered the goat path. Artos turned to Galbart Glover. Lord Glover, hold the infantry here. We'll take the cavalry through the hills. Once we have crossed, bring the infantry through, he commanded. Aye, my lord, said the Lord of Deepwood Motte. Ulrich enjoyed fighting and he enjoyed being at war again. But at the same time, he missed Jane, he missed home at Moat Cailin and he missed his son Edwyle. Before leaving Moat Cailin for the war, Jane had gifted him a wooden pendant with a reindeer carved into it, and engraved on the lining were the names Ulrich, Jane and Edwile. I shouldn't be here. I should be back home and be in bed with Jane and playing with Edwile. Though it will be strange to not have Egon play with Edwile. He is so good with children, he'll be a brilliant father when he is crowned king and is seated on the ugly iron throne. Ulrich rode alongside the cavalry of House Kelstark, after the Umbers led their own cavalry through the hills. Upon crossing the hills, Ulrich saw Benfred and Brandon Tallheart lead the wild hares ahead. Where do they go, brother? Ulrich asked Artos as he joined him, Brandon and Arya. To look for Stafford Lannister and his army, replied Artos. When the infantry had begun to cross through the hills, the Tallhearts and their wild hares returned. Artos. We found the Lannister army, said Benfred, panting, but proud as he rode toward him. Good work. Where are they, Ben? asked Artos. Near a village called Oxcross. They number some 25,000 men. But even better, they don't have any defenses or perimeters set up, said Benfred. No perimeters? No picket lines or anything of the sort, asked Ulrich. None. They probably think they don't need to in the heartland of the Westerlands, replied Brandon Tallheart. Artos turned to the northern lords and the commanders of the Golden Company. It's night time. If we ride with the cavalry now, we can catch them unawares and slaughter the bastards before they know what hit them, said Artos. I agree, my lord. The infantry will slow us down if we march with them, said Roose Bolton. But the infantry cannot stay here. On the other side of the Golden Tooth, said Harry Strickland. And they won't, Captain Strickland. Whilst we ride, they will march for Lannisport, said Artos. Lannisport. My lord, that is too great a city to take, said Major Sewin. Lord Stark has the right of it, Lord Sewin. For the Dornish fleet to arrive, they will need a big port. And Lannisport is the largest port of the Westerlands, if we hope to unload the Dornish army in the time that we have, said John Connington. Artos nodded at the words of John Connington. Lord Sewin and Sir Rowley, you will command the infantry and their march to Lannisport. The rest, we shall lead the cavalry to Oxcross. Benfred, lead the way. Artos and John Connington led 9,000 knights and cavalry of the North and the Golden Company. Ulrich looked around and saw Rickon riding alongside Sir Willis Marndaly. It's good that he brought Rickon to this war. Knowing my brother as I do, he would have hated to have grown up and not take part in this war when his brothers all had. It was a few hours of hard riding for Oxcross until Benfred halted the march. We're here, my lords. Another mile and we'll be within a stone's throw away from the campsite, said Benfred. Artos drew a Mirish spyglass from his knapsack and looked in the distance. Can you see much from that in the middle of the night, brother? asked Brandon incredulously. Well, thanks to the moonlight and the campfires, I can actually. Lord Connington, would you care to look at the enemy's base? Artos passed the spyglass to the former Lord of Griffin's Roost and he peered through it. He chuckled as he looked at the enemy from a mile away. And they have no idea whatsoever that we are here, added Great Jon Umber with a bloodthirsty grin. But they will, my lords, the longer we idle here, Roose Bolton pointed out. Lord Bolton speaks true, my lords. The longer we idle here, the more chance they have of discovering us here, said Sir Willis. John Connington passed his spyglass back to Artos as he looked at the camp's defences. Lord Connington and Captain Strickland, take the company's cavalry to the north of the campsite. Lord Karstark and Lord Ryswell, you will take your cavalry to the east of the camp. Lord Dustin and Sir Willis will take your cavalry to the west of the camp. Myself and Lord Bolton shall command the attack on the south of the camp. All attack once you see the signal, said Artos. And what is the signal, my lord? asked Sir Willis. Artos looked down at Grey Wind. Listen out for the howling of direwolves and the screams accompanying them, Artos replied with a grin. Ulrich led the cavalry of Moat Cailin to join the Karstarks and Dustins as they rode quietly and slowly to the eastern side of the campsite. As Ulrich led the cavalry of Moat Cailin, he noticed a large pavilion tent that was closest to their side. On all corners of this tent were Lannister banners, fluttering grandly in the weak westerly winds. That must be Stafford Lannister's tent, Ulrich reasoned as he reached for his sword. Ulrich wielded it around a few times and looked ahead, eager to crush this army which had no idea of their presence. Ulrich looked down at his direwolf, whom noticed him looking at him and looked up with an affectionate and quiet yelp. He beamed as he climbed down from his horse and he stroked Frostclaw, whom nuzzled his wet nose against Ulrich's hand. Ulrich chuckled and hugged Frostclaw before climbing back onto his horse and turning back to the Lannister camp. "Come on. Come on. Artos, send Grey Wind, Sharp and Summer already." Sure enough, his ears pricked up when he heard a few fearsome growls from the south. Shortly after, pained screams were heard. "Those aren't Lannister men. They're dinner for Grey Wind, Sharp, Summer, Nymeria and Shaggy-Dog. Now, Frostclaw I'm sure is hungry also. Charge!" Ulrich yelled as he drew his sword. He yelled as he urged his horse forward towards the Lannisters. He opened his eyes wide at seeing Frostclaw outrunning him and charging straight into a soldier climbing out of his tent, only to be jumped upon by Frostclaw. His screams did not last long before Frostclaw's fangs found his throat. Ulrich sliced his sword across at a soldier running for his horse. The blow sliced across and cut him down before he could reach for the saddle. He continued to ride for the large Lannister pavilion and cut down a half-dressed red cloak whom just grabbed a spear. Ulrich cut his sword down on his helm, denting it and killing the red cloak. Ulrich spotted a man run from the pavilion. He was dressed in Lannister armor like that worn by the Kingslayer. His hair was long and golden and graying. Just from looking at him, Ulrich despised him, like he despised the Lannisters for trying to capture his family at Riverrun and slaughtering thousands of Riverlanders to do it. "Stafford Lannister!" Ulrich roared. The Lannister turned around and drew his sword. "Artos Stark," he yelled, taking up a shield. "Wrong. His brother, Ulrich Kell Stark of Moat Cailin." Ulrich snapped with a grin as he rode toward him. "You will not win this war. Tywin will crush you all," he boasted. "How?" "Hiding in Duskendale with the Tyrells." Ulrich japed. Stafford Lannister charged toward him, his sword and shield both raised. Ulrich blocked the blows with his shield and then sliced across at his breastplate. The blow didn't kill him, but it did knock him to the ground. Ulrich dismounted from his horse and raised his sword up. He impaled Stafford Lannister through the heart, his sword piercing through the dented breastplate and killing him instantly. Ulrich looked up when he heard a direwolf growling. He could see Sharp tearing into a knight's jugular as he screamed. Sharp stopped when the knight finally stopped screaming and she followed after Deanna when her mistress rushed for the pavilion. "Damn! Where is Lannister?" Deanna muttered. "He's right here, sister. I got to him before you could," said Ulrich, pointing at Stafford Lannister's corpse. "Greedy bastard, brother. I wanted to kill him," Deanna replied with annoyance. "There's more Lannisters from where he came from, have no fear," said Ulrich. Chapter 48, Grand Old Casterly Rock. Chapter text. Bellenora 6. "You're certain of this?" asked Bellenora. "I am, Bella." "All of them say the same thing," said Jalla. Jalla Jakku was Bellenora's foremost spy in Umbaru and she had personally rode from Umbaru to Lotus Point to bring Bellenora the news she had been waiting for. "By the gods, the end is near," said Bellenora. "The end of Rugaria, certainly. And the gods have certainly ensured that this day would come," Jalla eagerly replied. "Even with this information, there are still thousands more of them than there are of Summer Isles warriors and Storm Company." "Well done, Jalla. I'll bring this news to Storm Company," said Bellenora. "Yes, Bellenora. Now, may the gods keep you safe from when Rugaria comes back," said Jalla. Bellenora leant in and hugged her old friend. "It'll take more than Rugaria to stop me," Bellenora replied with a smile. Bellenora left the port of Lotus Point and walked back home. She needed to bring this news to Xharo for him to then bring to Algerdus. And now, this war may finally end, Rugaria will be dead and the Summer Isles will be free of the outside world, as it always had been and how it always should be. She returned back home and looked around for her brother. "Where is he?" "Xharo." "Brother," she called. She heard footsteps from the other side of the entrance hall. The man there surprised Bellenora. She wasn't expecting to see him there at all. "Bellenora," he greeted with a bow of his head. "Algerdus. What brings you here?" she asked as she walked toward him. They walked into the dining room. "Your brother has gone to bring the other commanders of the Summer Isles army here." He says that he should have an extra 2,000 men for the army, he explained. Good. With the news I have, we will need as many warriors as we can get to fight for the Summer Isles, she thought. Is something wrong? He asked. Yes. No. He narrowed his eyes in curiosity until they heard the door open. Algirdas, I return. Xharo announced. Xharo entered the kitchen, accompanied by numerous other warriors Bellanora had seen Xharo spend time with, such as fellow veterans of the Second Sons. Sister. I wasn't expecting to see you here. I thought you would be at Parrot's flight, said Xharo. I bring important information from my spies, she explained. At that, all eyes turned to her. What news? Asked Algirdas. I spoke with my spy whom rode all the way from Umbaru to deliver me this news. She says that in 2 weeks, Rugaria will make landfall on the beaches of Spring Endeavor, she explained. How sure was your spy of this information? Asked Xharo. She heard the same story, from all 6 of my spies inside Rugaria's army. So it must be true, Bellanora explained. Then this is it. But, how many men does the army number? Asked Algirdas. 25,000 men, said Bellanora. We number 18,000 men now. We'll number 20,000 by the time that Rugaria makes landfall, assured Xharo. Numbers aren't the problem, said Algirdas. Then what is? Asked Bellanora. Algirdas frowned and sighed through his nose before turning to Bellanora. Rugaria is a slippery snake by all accounts. He spent less than 2 years conquering and subjugating the Summer Isles to make it his kingdom. He will not give all that he has done without a bloody fight. Whatever he has, he will use. He won't hide any tricks, he'll throw everything he has at us. And, even if we just simply defeat him, he would escape and just return to his family all the way in lies and hire more sellswords and return with another army, explained Algirdas. So, what is to be done? Asked Xharo. Not only for him to be defeated, but he has to die. With the destruction of his army and his killing, we will end the war for good and send a clear message to the Rugarias in lies and show them that the Summer Isles are not some small village that they can simply intimidate into submission, Algirdas replied. But that can be done, can it not? Asked Bellanora. Yes, we can ambush as they make landfall and slaughter them, suggested Xharo. With their ships and boats at sea, where they, and Rugaria can make an easy escape. Algirdas pointed out. Damn, he's right. No. Around this Spring Endeavor, we find a suitable place from where we can launch a trap on him. He will be guarded and paranoid when he makes landfall. But, if we let him land safely and his army march for Lotus Point, he will lower his guard and leave himself vulnerable for a surprise attack. Xharo, tonight, you and I will ride for Spring Endeavor and see if we can find the perfect spot to attack. And whilst we fight him, your ships can attack his ships and prevent their escape by sea. Xharo nodded in deep thought as he considered his plan. Very well. Tonight, said Xharo, and he left the dining room with his friends. Bellanora glanced at Algirdas, the man whom still stayed to fight for the Summer Isles, a place he was a stranger to, rather than return home to fight to defend his country and protect his family. How many wars have you fought in, Algirdas? She asked. He turned to her whilst he had been drinking from a cup of wine. He considered what to say for a moment. This will be my 6th. And when I return to Westeros, that will be my 7th, he replied before looking down at his hands. I've often wondered if it is possible for me to go back home. Or if I am just lying to myself and wanting to travel the world and fight wars forever. Or if I want to go to my new home at Summerhall that my brother gifted me, he said with a slight smile. The smile disappeared as quickly as it appeared. That was the last time I ever saw all of my brothers. That day at King's Landing when Robert awarded me Summerhall, he replied. She didn't know why, but she reached her hand and laid it on his. He looked up at her. I may not have known your brothers, but I know that they would be proud of you for what you are doing here and what you will do when you go back home to defend the Stormlands from all enemies of House Baratheon. And here, I can rest at night, knowing that my brother and my people will live another day, because of what you are doing to protect us, she said. When he turned to her, she looked into his dark blue eyes. Gods, his eyes are so blue and so beautiful. It's like looking at a pair of sapphires, she thought as she kept her hand on top of his hand. He nodded and said, my thanks, Bellanora. Artos X. This is a desperate plan, my lord. It could work, but it bears great risk, said Jorah Mormont. With great risk comes great reward, Lord Mormont, and I would have mine. Not for the gold or the glory, but to humble the arrogant Lannister bastards and make them realize they are not as perfect as they think, replied Artos. Artos looked from the map of the Westerlands and then out of his tent and at the great towering sight in front of them. On his left, was Lannisport, the main city of the Westerlands and which contained one of the largest ports in the realm. And on his right, towering thrice times higher than the wall, was Casterly Rock. I agree, my lord, capturing Casterly Rock would indeed be a great blow to the morale of the Lannisters and anger Tywin Lannister. But Lord Mormont speaks true. If by chance we failed in the approach to the gates, they would be shut to us. We would never again get the chance to capture the rock, said Jon Connington. I cannot back down. If I do, what respect I earned at the Whispering Wood and at Riverrun would dissipate. My lord, it might be more advisable if we focused all our troops and resources in capturing Lannisport alone rather than just both of them. His Grace's orders after all were to capture a port for the Dornish to sail into, said Galbart Glover. My decision is made, my lords. We take both of the damned places that make the Lannisters feel so fucking arrogant and think they are above all others, replied Artos, speaking with clarity and volume to show he would not be convinced otherwise. Artos' plan to take both Lannisport and Casterly Rock was twofold. First, Howland and Meera Reed would lead a party of men and women of the Crannogs and stealthily get to the Lion's Mouth, the only gate leading into the rock itself. And Jon Connington would lead the taking of Lannisport with a full assault on the main gate, and as all attention was focused on the main gate, the remaining two gates would be stormed by the best of the Golden Company's fighting men. Once horns were blared that Lannisport was under attack, a small army inside the rock would muster and the Lion's Mouth would open for these reinforcements to get to Lannisport. Only for the Crannog men and Cranj women to sneak inside amidst the chaos and keep the gates open whilst the Northerners stormed inside, crushing the reinforcements and capturing the rock itself. Once this is all over, a Targaryen flag shall be flying from the banners of Lannisport and Casterly Rock. As night fell, Artos gave the command to the Golden Company to move out. He looked at Jon Connington, Harry Strickland, Franklin Flowers and Rolly Duckfield. All looked uncertain and worried as they talked about Artos' plan. It will work. I am certain of it. Artos took a deep breath as he climbed onto his horse, brought by his good squire, Oliver Free, and rode to lead the northern cavalry. Forwards he commanded with a whisper. Whilst Tormund Giantsbane and Styrthan lead the infantry, Artos led the cavalry, in a hushed march towards the closest outskirts of the seat of House Lannister. Come on. Come on, Artos whispered when they reached a small stream, where his horse and numerous other horses of Father's bannermen were drinking from. Come on. They should have launched the attack by now, Artos thought. And then he heard it. A loud horn blared from the city. And then another. And then shouts in the hundreds, both from beneath the walls of Lannisport and from the walls of Lannisport itself. And, as he predicted, within 5 minutes of Lord Reed and his party reaching the Lion's Mouth, the gates opened. It's working. It's actually working. Artos drew his great sword from his scabbard. Since reuniting with father, he had returned ice to him, especially now that he was returning home to Winterfell with mother, Lyanna, Rhaenys and the household of Winterfell. From his mirrorish spyglass, he watched as Howland and Meera Reed were the first to sneak inside through the great and enormous gates, quickly followed by their men and women. Artos pointed his sword at the gate. Advance, he loudly whispered. Father's bannerman and his cavalry followed after him as they spread out slightly and rode closer to the gates. And as Casterly Rock's reinforcements reached the Lion's Mouth, with only a distance of 100 meters separating them, Artos gave command loud. Charge! For Winterfell! For the north! Artos roared. Winterfell! The north, was repeated across the lines by all riders of the north following after Artos. Artos swung his sword around a few times as he spied the first of the reinforcements turning to them in surprise. Back inside! Back inside! Close the gates! Close the gates, shouted an officer. Artos swung his sword down on the mounted officer. The sword's blow beheaded him. The carnage was immediate. With the moonlight blocked by the overwhelming size of Casterly Rock, The only light from which Artois could see his opponents, was from the torch sconces above him. Artois stabbed a rider through his chainmail and into his chest. He sliced across and cut a knight down. His weak helm did not stop Artois' sword from splitting it open for blood and brains to spill out. Forward! Forward! Come on, lads! This day is not over yet. These southern cunts have yet to feel the fury of the north. Artois roared before he cut down a red cloak as he tried to thrust his spear at his horse. His swords blow across at his distinctive helm, caving his skull in before he fell onto his back. Artois pushed past numerous red cloaks for the infantry to deal with whilst he led the cavalry to the furthest heights of the rock. He rode his horse hard toward the archers, firing down on them with great discipline and aim. Artois felt a few arrows sliced cross at his shoulder pauldrons and at his breastplate covered with boiled leathers, but was largely unharmed before he and his cavalry cut them down. He looked up to the next viewpoint, overlooking the steps they had already climbed, and the Sunset Sea was garrisoned by numerous archers. He looked up to see many other archers were taking up position at least half a dozen more similar viewpoints. Gods, the stories that the rock could hold strong against 100,000 were not exaggerated. It's not surprised that Egon the Conqueror couldn't take Casterly Rock, even when he had 3 fully grown dragons. Artois rode towards this balcony and cut down one archer, eviscerating him from his neck to his chest. He cut across at a second. The blow cut his bow in half and the top half swung uselessly, holding only by the strong, before Artois stabbed him through his skull. Artois turned his horse around to climb up the next flight of stairs and face the next group of archers as his cavalry arrived to finish the rest of the archers off. Artois rode towards them, urging his horse forward with great urgency. He sliced his sword across at 2 archers, cutting their bows in half before he beheaded one and impaled the second through his neck. He chopped the arm off of a third before he turned to the next flight of stairs. Artois held his sword up, in spite of his arm tiring from the exertion. But his adrenaline and years of training prevailed as he continued toward the next group of archers. Artois rode directly into 3 archers, knocking them onto their backs, before he beheaded a 4th as he reached for an arrow from his quiver. Artois stabbed a 5th before he turned to the next flight of stairs. Gods, how much fucking further is this going to be? How many more must die this night? Artois turned his horse around once more, roaring as he did so, and then proceeded to charge further up the stairs, never seeming to end. Artois panted in exhaustion as he reached these archers. He stabbed one through his torso. And then he beheaded a second. Artois turned to a third and sliced at his throat, completely slicing his neck open to the extent that blood spat on his horse like water from a fountain. He looked up at the next balcony as he beheaded a 4th archer and saw his bannerman joining him, catching up in spite of Artois' eagerness to be the first to reach Casterly Rock. Artois charged towards this balcony, which was the second to last balcony, he realized. Gods, we just need to take these last 2 balconies and the rock is ours. Reinvigorated with this knowledge, Artois charged with greater energy and stamina toward the last archers in Casterly Rock's garrison. Artois beheaded an archer and stabbed a second before slicing down onto a third. His blow had sliced the 3rd archer from his shoulder to his belly. As he collapsed on top of his other comrades, Artois stabbed a 4th archer. He turned to see the final balcony was empty. Finally. No more fucking archers. We've done it. The rock is ours. Artois rode towards the last balcony and then to the small gates leading to Main Keep. He saw only a few knights stood with swords drawn and shields held up in front of the door. Artois climbed down from his horse, exhausted and thirsty. He held his great sword up, nearly falling onto the ground as he climbed down from his horse. He decided against stabbing his sword into the ground and using it to prop himself up. Put down your arms. Do not throw your lives away like this. Artois commanded. I swore an oath that I would defend Casterly Rock and serve House Lannister until my last dying breath, my lord. It would be the greatest shame of my life if I were to try and escape or to surrender, said the knight stood in the middle. Artois nodded in respect to the knight and his 2 comrades. Your name, sir? Artois asked. I am Sir Benedict of House Broom, my lord, he replied. Artois turned to the other 2 knights. And you, sirs? He asked. I am Sir Hayes of House Vicary, said the other. And I am Sir Nablon of House Garner, said the last. "Do you stand by this decision?" he asked as he held up his great sword. "We do, my lord," replied Sir Hayes. Athos nodded once and was joined by Daisy Mormont and Small Janumber. "To an honorable death. When this is over, I will ensure your bodies are returned to your homes," said Athos. "We would expect nothing less from you, my lord," said Sir Nabon as he held his sword and shield up in a defensive stance. Athos ran towards Sir Benedict. Sir Benedict blocked the first blow with his large shield. Athos dodged his thrust and cut down on his shield once more. Sir Benedict cut across at Athos' breastplate. The blow dented his breastplate slightly, but Athos used this as a chance to slice down with all his remaining strength and energy onto him. The blow cut down on Sir Benedict's helm and breastplate. His strong helm and cuirass saved him from death, but he could see the dents he had left on them. Sir Benedict fell onto his back, injured from the damage done to his armor and to his helm. Athos lifted his sword up and impaled his sword through Sir Benedict's breastplate, piercing into his heart. An exhausted Athos knelt down and closed his eyes shut. He then turned to Daisy to see her crush her mace onto Sir Nabon's helm and see his blood and brains splattered all on her mace. Small John had grabbed Sir Hayes and thrown him against a brick wall before stabbing him through his neck. "We've done it. The rock is ours." Athos took a deep breath as he turned back to Sir Benedict and had him lie down straight and placed his hands over his chest, with his fingers clasped around his sword. A knight of honor, right to the very end. Chapter 49, An Unprecedented Fallout. Chapter Text. Interlude XXII, a lead in Baker Ulus Osman, Turkish beauty. Edric Dane, Farouk Aran. "Look at that, Edric. And tell me, is that not the best sight you ever have seen?" asked father. "It is, father. It is." "Lannisport and Casterly Rock fallen," said Edric, grinning from ear to ear at the sight of Casterly Rock and Lannisport with no Lannister banners in sight, only the banners of House Targaryen. Aboard House Dane's flagship, the Seasword, Edric looked around at the Dornish fleet sailing for Lannisport. When Aunt Ashera had sent letters to Winterfell, Riverrun, the Eyrie and Sunspear, telling of the illegitimacy of Joffrey the Ill-Born, Doran and Oberyn Martell had called the Banners of Dawn, ordering for them to gather their armies and fleets. And aboard House Martell's flagship, Nymeria's Spear, Oberyn Martell led the Dornish fleet to Lannisport. It had been 2 days since they had received ravens telling that both capitals of the Westerlands had been captured by the Northerners and the Golden Company. Edric was eager to hear directly from cousin Athos how he had led the capture of Casterly Rock and achieved what Aegon the Conqueror could never have accomplished and what Lan the Clever had only accomplished with his wits. How could cousin Athos have achieved such a thing? "I know he is a great warrior, but since when had he been such a cunning wolf?" When he had been in Winterfell for cousin Athos' wedding to Rhaenys Targaryen, Edric had gotten the chance to spar with his cousins. Athos, Brandon and their good brother, Aegon Targaryen, were amongst the best Edric had ever fought and he could not defeat. As he was a Dane of Starfall and the future Lord of Starfall, it was expected of Edric to be a skilled knight and worthy enough to one day wield Dawn, the ancestral sword of House Dane, currently wielded by Uncle Arthur. Edric felt stunned as he looked at Lannisport as the Seasword followed Nymeria's spear to the dock. "Tywin Lannister, what would your ancestors think of you if they could see you right now, how you let some barbaric and savage Northerners capture your beloved home?" Edric thought with a grin as he looked around at the numerous Golden Company soldiers and Northern men at arms assembled on the quay. And standing amongst them, Edric could see his cousins Athos, Brandon, Ulrich, Deanna and Arya. He recognized numerous Northern noblemen and their sons and daughters from the wedding at Winterfell. And then there were many men wearing the armor and livery of the Golden Company. Prince Oberyn was the first to be greeted. "Prince Oberyn, welcome to Lannisport. I am sure that the Lannisters would be honored to welcome you here, if they could," said Athos with an amused grin. Many amongst the Golden Company, Northern and Dornish nobility laughed or chuckled at his jape, including Edric and Prince Oberyn as the Red Viper walked up the quay and toward Athos. "Indeed, Lord Athos. Standing here now, I find it incredible what you have achieved. My only regret is that I couldn't have been there to have seen the reactions of Tywin Lannister when he found out the news," said the Red Viper. "A feeling shared by us all, my prince," said a man with ginger hair and a strong beard, whom wore the armor of the Golden Company as well as a badge of a griffin on his breastplate. "Jon Connington. Jon Connington. It's been a long time," said Prince Oberyn. "Indeed, my prince. One long overdue for the Lannisters, I think he said before offering his hand. I couldn't agree more, said Prince Oberyn before he shook hands with John Connington and then with Artos. Edric walked up to Artos with father. Gods, little cousin. It's good to see you here. Though if you sailed any slower, the war would be over by now, said Artos. Don't you worry about that, cousin. I'll get my fair share and earn a reputation as a true Dane of Starfall, said Edric as he hugged Artos. Edric. Glad to see you here. There'll be plenty of Lannisters and Tyrells for you to kill, have no worry, said Brandon as he patted Edric on the back before Ulrich shook hands with him and Deanna and Arya both hugged him. Where is Uncle Arthur? Is he well? Asked Edric. He is well. He is guarding Aegon, the king, now. In Riverrun, said Arya. How is Aegon with all of this? He seemed shy in all things the last time I saw him in Winterfell, wondered Edric. He's coping. It's not been easy for him, that's true. But he is learning, especially with Aunt Elia helping him, replied Deanna. Edric smirked when he looked around and spotted a large pile of Lannister banners dumped on the side of a warehouse. Oh, to be a fly on the wall when Tywin Lannister hears of this news, Edric thought with a grin. Intel U23, RIP Ian Gelder, Game of Thrones Kevan Lannister, AV Club. Kevan Lannister, Ian Gelder. The rock has fallen, my lord. Though Kevan, his older brother and the assembled nobility of the Westerlands, the Crown Lands and the Reach heard the words of Maester Bruz of Duskendale, none of them could believe it. Give me that. Tywin's command was immediate in reply and was obeyed without question. The letter was given to Tywin, whom read it with narrowed eyes. Brother, asked Kevan. Tywin looked up, and when he looked at him, Kevan was immediately reminded of when they had heard of Jaime's capture and his great defeat at Riverrun. They have my home. Tywin's anger was unlike Kevan had ever seen of his brother. His face was reddened even more like the red on Lannister banners. His words were pronounced with fury and hatred to rival that of even the most volatile of Baratheons. How is this possible, brother? Asked Kevan, whilst all others sat in a shocked silence. The Starks and the Golden Company attacked at the same time, with the Golden Company capturing Lannisport. Amidst the chaos, a force of reinforcements marched out through the Lion's Mouth, only to be ambushed by Northern cavalry, whom smashed into them and through the gates, taking the rock. Tywin read out loud, his hands shaking with his fury, as if resisting the temptation to crumple the paper. That is incredible. The boy may be my enemy, but gods, he is a fucking genius. There was more, my lord hand, said Maester Bruz. All turned back to the Maester of Duskendale. The traitorous enemy are joined by Prince Oberyn Martell and the Dornish army after they made landfall at Lannisport, he explained. Gods. The Dornish as well. We should have seen this coming. Of course Doran and Oberyn Martell would have fought for their nephew's claim to the Iron Throne. Lord Tyrell, what news is there of the armies of the Reach? Asked Tywin, calming slightly as he turned to the Lord of Highgarden. All remaining armies of the Reach are fully trained, equipped and ready to march, my lord hand. Merely give the command and they shall join us here, said Mace Tyrell. This will bring our forces to at least 110,000 men, brother. More than the traitors can muster against us, said Kevan. Tywin nodded before turning to Maester Bruz. Bring me a quill and some good parchment, said Tywin. There's one more ally we can bring to the table, he said as the Maester did as he was bid. Whom, my lord? Asked Daemon Marbrand. The Greyjoys. I have received word from Pike that Balon and Victorian Greyjoy are dead and their brother, Euron, has taken control of Pike and has crowned himself king of the Iron Islands. But that makes the Iron Islanders traitors, my lord. We cannot make an alliance with such traitors, insisted Sebastian Farman, whose insistence Kevan understood, for his home of Faircastle was often on the forefront of Ironborn raids for centuries. That is true, Lord Farman, but for now, the Targaryens and their traitorous allies are the true enemy. The Ironborn are secondary and shall be dealt with once the Targaryens are dealt with. If Euron proves to be reasonable, he can remain Lord Paramount of the Iron Islands, once he has proven himself a useful ally. I will send word to him to invade the north. With the northern armies fighting in the south, they have left their homes unguarded for an invasion by sea. If the northerners would dare to invade the west, the north shall soon know what we feel today, my lord, said Tywin. Has there been any word from the Stormlands? Asked Tywine. Indeed, brother, but nothing good. The Stormlords still do not leave their homes with their armies. Shireen Baratheon orders that they keep their armies at home rather than march to join us, said Kevan. Then they align themselves with our enemy. The Targaryens murder her father and uncle, and she does nothing behind the safety of Storm's End, said Tywine. Lord Hand, I am sure that she and Lord Fortis are still in grief over their losses, said Lord Tyrell. It's been less than 4 moons since their deaths, Lord Tyrell. And yet, they refuse to march and join their armies with ours in defense of their cousin, our rightful king, said Tywine. Perhaps, Lord Hand, it may be prudent to send an army to the Stormlands and remind them of their allegiance to the Iron Throne or be rooted out as traitors, suggested Randyll Tarly. Tywine nodded in thought. Indeed, Lord Tarly. Lord Tyrell, send a raven to Lord Rowan and have him lead an army on the Stormlands to deal with this descent however he sees fit. Yes, Lord Hand, said Mace Tyrell. Chapter 50, The Stag and the Summer. Notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Chapter text. Algedus 17. Ruguria's army have broken camp and are marching for Lotus Point, uncle, said Mark. How far away are they from us? Asked Algedus. They'll march straight toward our positions in 2 hours, uncle, he replied. Algedus nodded with a smile. Good. Now, all that remains, is that we prepare our trap. Algedus rode with his nephews and with Bronn to the head of Storm Company. How are we going to do this then? Asked Bronn. We line all infantry to face their infantry and their elephants, said Algedus. How many elephants do they have? Robin asked Mark worriedly. 30, Mark replied as he gulped. What about their cavalry? Asked Bronn. I'll lead the cavalry to hit the cavalry at their flank. Now, knowing Ruguria wants a quick victory, he'll want to send his elephants to smash our troops fast and quick. We'll let him do that, but they will charge straight into our spears and pikes. Since when has a phalanx stopped an elephant, uncle? Asked Tolaz. Today, because that is what we shall do. Once the elephants strike, the phalanx pushes back at them, just as their infantry charge at ours. Our archers will press hard on them and deal as much damage to their elephants and infantry as we can. And once we crush their cavalry on the flank, we spread the formation and hammer straight down onto them, explained Algedus. And what will stop Ruguria from sending his elephants from flanking the infantry? Asked Tor Owen. Because the infantry will line themselves up in the gap between Lover's Cliff up there, said Algedus, pausing to point at a local cliff overlooking where many Summer Islanders chose to wed. And there, near that riverbed. And it is there, that they will send their cavalry. But that is also where we shall be, said Algedus. You gamble a lot on this, uncle, said Edric. I do. But with this, we will gain yet another great victory for the company and an end to Ruguria, replied Algedus. And a quicker end to this war, that I may return home and protect it from any enemy that dares come to Storm's End. Whether they are Lannister, Martell, Targaryen, Stark or fucking Tyrell. Algedus led the cavalry of Storm Company and the Summer Isles to the right flank. It had been an hour since the enemy left camp and their scouts had discovered them. Now, Algedus could feel the ground shudder at the very stampede of the elephants beyond. I've faced the armies of Bravos, hordes of Dothraki, a legion of Unsullied and pirates of the Stepstones. But now, I face elephants. He saw that he was indeed right. The elephants were being charged straight towards the phalanx being formed by the infantry. Spears and pikes stretching 3 meters. Those pikes will at least discourage the elephants from hammering straight into them, Algedus thought optimistically. Algedus felt a shiver as he watched the elephants charge through the trees, followed by thousands of marching infantry, sellswords, Lysnes and Summer Islanders. And then, he spotted their cavalry. All gathered on their left flank, directly opposite Algedus and his cavalry. Charge! Follow me! Algedus yelled as he unsheathed antler and forked fury. All cavalry followed after him as he rode straight towards the enemy horsemen. Algedus' roar was long and fearsome as he clashed at the first of the enemy. His sword and axe cut down cavalrymen in equal measure as they came to blows with them. But it was the sounds of the elephants roaring and crushing their ground with their stomps that unnerved Algedus. Tor Owen, Tymund and Tolaz are all there, he thought with worry for his nephews. Warrior, keep them safe, he thought as he looked briefly up at the sky. He cut down 2 more cavalry before one of them gave the command to retreat. Form up, lads. We end this war today, and we end Rugaria. Algirdas roared as he led the cavalry onto the exposed infantry, whom had now all broken formation to charge at the phalanx. But Algirdas could see the elephants hammering at the phalanx. Few elephants were killed by infantry cutting at their underbellies, impaling them with numerous spears or shooting dozens of arrows at their heads. Algirdas looked around for the tyrant whom had terrorized the Summer Isles for 2 years. At last, he spotted an elephant decorated with armor and had Valyrian glyphs painted on its trunk, ears and legs. On the back of this elephant was a howdah carrying a dozen archers and a man wearing beautifully decorated Lysan armor and was firing arrows alongside the other archers. Rugaria. Algirdas charged at the infantry that were all that stood in the way between he and Rugaria. He sliced down one with antler and chopped another's head off with forked fury before he crushed into the infantry's rear line. Algirdas sliced, stabbed, chopped and smashed on 2 numerous infantrymen, wounding or killing them before he reached Rugaria's elephant. Rugaria. Algirdas bellowed. The elephant roared ferociously as it stood on its hind legs as it was turned around to face Algirdas. Algirdas' own horse neighed as it reared up. But as the elephant roared, Algirdas spotted something on its underbelly. Ropes, connected to the howdah. If I cut those, that howdah collapses and Rugaria is mine. Algirdas looked up to see the howdah's archers and Rugaria aim for him. He laughed before his horse stood on all 4 legs once again. Half of the arrows missed him. A quarter scratched his armor, but unharmed him. The other quarter cut at his chainmail, breaking his skin, but not fatally. He charged to the side of the elephant and with antler, he sliced at the ropes he could see. The elephant's blare from its trunk was a terrible scream of pain at Valyrian steel breaking its skin. And as he predicted, the howdah slipped from the elephant's back and fell onto the ground with an enormous crash. "Protect the king," was shouted from many of Rugaria's infantry, whilst the huge elephant ran away from the battle, trampling men as it escaped the carnage. Algirdas climbed down from his horse and cut down several infantry whom ran to protect Rugaria. He saw Rugaria crawl from the howdah. As he stood up, he threw away his broken bow and drew his sword. Rugaria. He turned around and saw Algirdas. "Algirdas Stormborn," he said as he held his sword up. He yelled as he charged towards Algirdas. He sliced his sword down onto Algirdas' head. Algirdas blocked the blow with forked fury and used its hook to push the blade away. The push had thrown Rugaria's sword away. Algirdas thrusted antler toward his fancifully decorated breastplate. The blade pierced through into his heart. Rugaria stared at Algirdas before Algirdas pulled antler out. "Rugaria is dead. Rugaria is dead." The shout of Rugaria's death was reverberated around Storm Company and the Summer Islander rebels. It increased the morale of the rebels, whom pushed forward against what was left of Rugaria's army until their eventual surrender. Bellinora 7. The news had come of the great battle of Spring Endeavor and how Algirdas had killed Rugaria himself. In the streets of Lotus Point, the people rejoiced at the long-awaited liberation of their country from Rugaria's tyranny. Bellinora was no different and drank heartily with her friends Gelaro, Salinos and Rala at Rala's family mansion. "I can't remember feeling this happy in a long time," said Salinos as he finished yet another cup of wine. "I haven't felt this elated since we lost our maidenheads together," Rala said to Bellinora with a lustful grin. "I'm glad to see you are all celebrating." Bellinora turned to Rala's father, Jalal Zarku, one of the most prominent nobles of the Summer Isles and whom had been the most outspoken against Rugaria. "It's a wonderful time in the Isles, father. For Rugaria is at last dead and we are all free once again," said Rala. "That is true. But now the time has come for us to choose what happens," said her father. "What do you mean, my lord?" asked Salinos. "This has become an age of Valyrian warlords conquering and carving their own sovereign kingdoms. Rugaria was just one of many. Our friends, Storm Company, helped another, a Volanten called Jaire Varlinaron, conquer all of Slavers Bay which he rules as king from Meereen." "So, what is to be done, father?" asked Rala. "Myself and the nobles all meet at the Summer's mansion tonight, to discuss the future of the Summer Isles and what steps we can take to ensure that another such as Rugaria doesn't come to conquer," said Jalal Zarku. "He's right. The warlords of Essos won't be content with just leaving the Summer Isles alone. They'll learn from Ruguria's mistakes and invade. They'll hire sellswords in the thousands or even butcher our people just to be safe. Later that night, Bellanora arrived home to attend the council of nobles. She was surprised to see Algirdas there, standing alongside Xharo. She felt her heart beat faster just seeing him. Gods, I want to take him upstairs to my bed now. All nobles and princes of the Summer Isles were in attendance, even those whom had been exiled before Rugaria had invaded, such as Jalabaxho. Now that we are all here, it is time that we think of the future of our country and our people, that what we have endured the last few years never ever happens again, said Father, beginning the meeting. Indeed, Malqualtal. That's why I think that we need is unity. We cannot merely return to our old way of life that we enjoyed before all of this began, said Mareroroku. What do you propose then? Asked Father. That we elect our kings, as they elect Triax in Volantis. It will show our strength to the world and how our warriors are all ready to fight together to protect our homeland against any invader. And above all, for a king to lead us in times of peace and war. If there is anything that we should have learned from Rugaria's invasion, his subjugation of us all and the battles that followed, we must have clear direction from a king. Many agreed to his proposal, whilst some spoke in favor of returning to their old way of life. Answering to just one king should discourage any other warlord such as Rugaria from invading, added Xharo. What say you, Lord Baratheon? As the hero who slew Rugaria, what do you think should be done for the future of the Isles? Asked Tabalazo, Salanor's father. All turned to man whom led the war in favor of the Summer Isles triumphing over Rugaria. I agree that there is clear disunity in the Summer Isles and that a king would unite all in times of peace and war and show to both friends and enemies that the Summer Isles is not as weak as it was previously thought, he replied, looking around the nobility gathered as he spoke, only stopping when his eyes caught sight of Bellanora. When he looked at Bellanora, she felt as though she was trembling underneath his gaze. So, whom should be elected king? Asked Marera. I put myself forth. After all, it was I whom brought Storm Company to this war, said Jalabaxho. And you know what it means to be a king, do you, Jalabar? You who have spent many years in the court of King Robert Baratheon of Westeros begging for an army to invade the Summer Isles on your behalf, sneered Xaltus Karen. As it escalated into arguing, Bellanora decided to leave for her chambers. They are supposed to be deciding the future of our country, and yet they bicker and argue as though they were children still learning from tutors or training in the practice yard. Bellanora walked into her chambers and sat down on her bed and looked out at the window from where she was sat. It's so beautiful. Especially now that we are free of Rugaria. Are you all right? Bellanora was surprised to see Algirdas there, standing at the door. I am, yes. Thank you, Algirdas, she replied. What happens now? She asked him. For me? Yes, she replied. I leave soon, with the company. For the Stormlands. I received a raven from my niece Shireen telling of how the Tyrells of Highgarden have sent an army to attack Storm's End, he replied. What of you? He asked. I don't know. Before the war, I thought I might become a priestess at the Temple of Love or travel around the world. But now, I don't know what I will do, she said. Algirdas walked to her bed and sat beside her. Your future, do you see yourself with me in it? What? Algirdas, she asked. Do you see yourself with me? I see myself fucking you over and over, yes. Just as I want to right here and right now. Bellanora leant in and kissed him on the lips. She held the kiss for a moment before he held her with his thick and strong arms. She shivered as their tongues danced at first in her mouth, before her skillful tongue found its way into his mouth. He gently pushed her to lie down on the bed. He ran one hand through her hair before Bellanora opened her eyes to see him taking his shirt and jerkin off. Bellanora did the same in taking off her dress and ran her hands over her large breasts, her nipples erect and hard as Algirdas pulled down his trousers. Gods, I haven't seen a cock that big since I was last at the Temple of Love. She looked up at him from his cock to his beautiful and handsome face. His muscular arms and legs were as thick as a tree trunk. Just looking at his abdominal muscles made her water in her mouth and she felt her cunt drip just looking at them and at his cock. He took her in his arms again, kissing her hard before his lips found her neck. Bellanora moaned as his lips and tongue explored all around her neck and collarbone. All while his hands explored her ass, her breasts and her clit. And it wasn't long before it wasn't just his hands exploring those parts. Her moans increased in volume as his tongue licked one nipple before biting the other. He moved down from her upper body to her clit, licking it and going inside. Oh. Oh. Gods. Yes. Don't stop. Don't stop. Bellanora begged as her hands reached for his head and fondled his hair. Bellanora enjoyed how his tongue explored her clit whilst his hands fondled her breasts. Stop, stop, she managed to say breathlessly. What? Why? He asked. She looked down at his cock and pointed at it. You've tasted me, but I haven't tasted you yet, she replied with a grin. Before he could reply, she took hold of his cock, quickly realizing that she would need both hands to rub the foreskin up and down. She leant down and took it in her mouth. She had thought after her time in the Temple of Love, and her previous times with many other lovers, that she no longer had a gag reflex with other men's cocks. How wrong she was, she soon realized. Gods, it's so big. Her mouth could only take half of his lance as she pushed herself up and down, taking his length inside her mouth. How could any woman get used to a cock of this size? Time for the main banquet, I think, Bella said Algirdas. Bellanora was glad, she couldn't take his length inside her mouth anymore without coughing and gagging. She let go of his cock and took a deep breath before she lay down on the bed once again. Algirdas leant over her and kissed her hard once again before he stuffed one breast in his mouth before moving on to the other one. And as he kissed, licked and sucked her breasts, he entered deep inside her. Did the gods reward him with an enormous cock for killing Rugaria? Fuck, she moaned as she could feel him reaching the end of her womb. Gods, don't stop. Don't ever stop, she moaned as her hands reached for his back. Her nails dug into his back whilst she wrapped her legs around his waist. The last time she had taken Salanos to bed, he had told her that her legs were like steel when she wrapped them around him. I am not letting you go until you fill me full of your seed. Her moans increased in volume with every thrust he made. Though it seemed he was trying to quieten her down every time his lips kissed found her lips when they had previously been at her neck or her breasts. She enjoyed listening to her cheeks making a slapping noise every time that his hips hit her cheeks. Gods, I could get used to this. Fuck. Fuck. I'm coming, she screamed. Her orgasm made her shudder and made her roll her eyes. In spite of her orgasm, Algirdas continued thrusting inside her and moaning almost as loud as she. She pulled him in to kiss him once again. She bit his lips as she kissed him. As they broke from the kiss, she could feel his pace quicken. Gods. Bella, I'm close, he said. Inside. I'm not letting you go until all of your seed fills inside of me, she moaned. She felt as though his cock exploded deep inside her. She panted as she felt his seed overflow inside her womb. As he pulled out of her, Bellanora pulled him down to lie beside her. That was incredible, Algirdas said breathlessly before managing a laugh. I learned so many things at the Temple of Love, she remarked as she rested her head on his very muscled body. You have. Gods. That was amazing. You are amazing, Bella, he said as his hands found her hair and he ran his fingers through her hair, kissing her head as he did so. When do you go to the Stormlands? Let's not talk of that, he said before kissing her head again. Very well. What would you speak of? She asked. Marry me. What? Did he really just say that? Bella, I know that we haven't known each other for long, but I love you so much. You breathe such life into me and you've shown me something I have always desired to find. What's that? Something beyond glory and honor. Something worth settling down for. But, I know nothing of Westeros or of its customs, she tried to say. That doesn't matter to me. I love you and I want to spend the rest of my life with you, he said. Bellanora sat up and wrapped her hands around him, pulled him in and kissed him on the lips, holding the kiss briefly before kissing him on his head. I love you too. But does none of what I said matter to you? None of it. I only want to marry you, Bellanora Summers, he replied. Yes. Yes, I will marry you, Algirdas Baratheon, she said, feeling happier than he had felt when she had heard the news of Rugaria's death. Notes. Battle of Spring Endeavor is based on the Battle of the Hydaspes, between Alexander the Great of the Macedonian Empire and King Pras of the Pauravus Kingdom. Chapter 51, The Kraken Swim to a New Shore. Notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Chapter text. Ashura 13. My lord, a visitor is in the great keep wishing to speaking with you, but has not given her name, said Jory. She, Jory. Whom is she? A southerner, asked Ned. No, my lord. Ironborn, I think, from how she smells of the sea and speaks like a Mormont, he replied. It must be Asher Greyjoy. But what is she doing here? Asking for Theon to return home to Pike for him to be heir to the Iron Islands. Or does Balon Greyjoy want to launch another rebellion in the name of the Old Way? His father, Quayan, had the right of it. The Old Way is just that, old and not of use in this day and age. When I asked her about weapons, she replied, no, thanks, I've got my own, added Jory. Ashura chuckled at that. Yes, that's the sort of thing Theon would say. It could be Theon's sister, Asher Greyjoy, said Ashura. Ned nodded and turned to Jory. Show her in, Jory, said Ned. A minute later, Jory returned into Ned's solar. He escorted a lean and long-legged young woman, whose dark hair was darker than her black eyes. She reminded Ashura of the women of House Mormont for how they preferred leathers and chainmail to dresses and skirts. But whilst she wasn't as tall or as muscular as someone such as Daisy or Alysanne Mormont, she had the look of a hardened sailor and smelled of the sea, of ale and of wine. You have the look of your brother, Lady Asher, said Ned. I am Asher of House Greyjoy, I. Opinions differ on whether I'm a lady, she replied as she took a chair. Drink, Captain Asher, asked Ashura. Captain Asher. I like that better. And some of your Carhold bronze would be good, she replied. Ned poured her a cup and passed it to her. She raised the cup to Ned and drank it thirstily. Now, why are you here, Asher Greyjoy? Asher Greyjoy waited until she had finished her drink before she set her cup on Ned's table and replied. Father and Uncle Victorian are dead. And my uncle Euron, the Crow's Eye, has returned to the Iron Islands. He killed them, I know it. And he has now crowned himself king of the Iron Islands, she replied. Gods, Euron Greyjoy, Ashura thought as she remembered hearing all the stories about him. From merchants coming to Winterfell from as far as Yeti, Iben and Len, they would tell stories of ships, ports and cities being razed and looted by the pirates sailing underneath the banner of a red eye, a black crown and two crows. This ship was the Silence, so called because all sailors aboard had their tongues cut out by their captain. I am sorry for your losses, but what is he doing now, asked Ashura. He has made a deal with Tywin Lannister. He leads an invasion fleet of 500 ships and 30,000 men, all intent on invading the north. At the shores of the Rills, she explained. Gods, Tywin allies himself with a man whom claims himself king of the Iron Islands. Never mind the fact that it's the damned Crow's Eye. All houses whom have suffered from him, such as the Redwynes, Hightowers, Grimms and Farmans, will be infuriated at the news. What terms do you want, Asher Greyjoy? You didn't come all this way just to warn us of the impending danger, asked Ashura. I did not. I want Theon to come home with me when the Crow's Eye is dead. He is lord of the Iron Islands by right, she replied. And you are willing to bend the knee to King Aegon, asked Ned. If it will mean ridding the world of the Crow's Eye, I. And I'm not alone in this, she replied keenly. Ned turned to Ashura and she nodded at him. Jory, with me. We have a war with the Ironborn to prepare. Ash, send a raven to the king and inform him of this, and to send for Theon at once, said Ned. My lord, said Jory. Of course, said Ashura before she poured another drink for their guest. Thanks. Good mead, this, said Asher Greyjoy as she drank from it. It is. Though I still prefer the wine of my homeland, said Ashura. Dornish red is good. But when I am out at sea, there's nothing I like better than something strong to give me the vigor I need to sail, added the only daughter of Balon Greyjoy. But it was as she was drinking from the cup, that their guest noticed something about her cup. There was an engraving of a kraken on it and the words "We do not sow" carved below the kraken. That's Theon's cup. He had engraved it himself as he started to settle down in Winterfell, sampling the taverns and brothels of Winterfell, replied Ashura. She chuckled at hearing that. How is he? She asked. He is well. He's been fighting the Lannisters in the Westerlands with the northern armies. And for a while, He's been fighting with his own sword, a Valyrian steel sword, said Ashura. Valyrian steel? Asher asked with a puzzled brow raised. A few years ago, a vault in the first keep was discovered to contain chests with dozens of ingots of Valyrian steel, as well as gifting weapons made of them to our bannermen, our friends in Dorne, the Vale, the Stormlands and the Riverlands. Theon was also gifted a longsword. He's named it Unrelenting. She nodded in approval. Good name for a sword. And what's he been raised like? Like we have raised my own children. He's been taught how to meet lords and hold court. For 2 years he sailed ships in Bear Island and White Harbor, even navigating the Kalin Canal a few times. He's not a stranger to the sea or to battle, if that's what you are wondering, replied Ashura before she changed the subject of their conversation. You spoke of others who feel the same as you with regards to Euron the Crow's Eye. Whom are they? Asked Ashura. Mother's brother, my uncle Roderick Harlaw, and all other branches of House Harlaw. The Blacktides too, after he murdered Baelor Blacktide, she explained. The 2 most powerful houses of the Iron Islands, barring the Greyjoys. Good, she and Theon will need their support once the damned Crow's Eye is dead. Interlude Xiv, The Last Kingdom, Best Male Character Season 1. Theo Val, Rune Tempt. Ned. I've seen them. The my unborn fuckers LL make landfall within the hour, said Theo's cousin, Hugo. Good. Let's give them all their due before they join their drowned god, said Ned as he sat beneath the heart tree, holding ice in his hands. Long time since I last killed Ironborn scum. It'll be good to spill their blood and guts in hundreds and thousands. Theo of Clan Val took one last look up at the heart tree before holding his axe up to his face and kissing the blade. He took hold of the thistle necklace Mother had made for him when he was a boy. He held it close to his heart before he stood up and let go of it. As his necklace bounced against his furs and chainmail, Ned stood up and sheathed ice. Jory, get all of the men into position, commanded the Ned. Aye, my lord, said Jory before he started issuing commands to men of the clans and the reserves whom had been brought to the war. If it's this battle that I die, it'll be good and glorious death, said cousin Hugo with a grin. Aye. And it'll be good to slaughter these Ironborn pirate scum and show them our steel for trying to invade North, said Theo as he spun his axe in a circle with both hands. Theo and Hugo laughed and bantered about the many battles they had fought in the past, in Robert's Rebellion, the Greyjoy Rebellion, the War of the Long Night, and now this. This was Theo's 4th war as champion of Clan Val. They marched with Ned to the wooded hills overlooking the Rill shores. And as they arrived, Theo spotted the first of the Ironborn ships make landfall. Thought you would have a safe voyage from home to here, you fucking pirate fools. You'll soon think again when I chop all your fucking heads off, Theo thought as he saw many Ironborn climb off their ships. Now, Ned, asked Theo. No, not yet. Not until at least half their ships land their crews, said the Ned. Theo counted the ships that had already made landfall and whose crews were disembarking. He counted 50 ships. By the gods, fucking hurry up. I'm not getting any younger waiting for you young cunts to finish. Theo grimaced as they waited and archers started take up arrows. Gods, my cock is hardening right now for all these scum I'm about to kill, muttered Hugo. Aye, mine too, said Theo with a grin. Theo counted the ships that landed their crews, counting over 200. Lord Stark, asked Roose Riswell. Get your cavalry ready, Riswell. Now, said Ned with a nod. The youngest Riswell boy climbed onto his horse and started to lead the cavalry away to the flank and await the signal. Start getting ready. Remember, we wait for the archers to finish, said the Ned. Aye, Ned. Don't worry. We'll gut these fuckers soon, said Theo excitedly. The Ned of the Starks unsheathed ice and held it up against his face before kissing the blade before lowering it once more. Archers. Knock. Draw loose. All archers drew arrows and fired onto the beach, infested with the Ironborn whom dared to invade the north. Thought that you fucks could swamp the north, burn our trees or sacrifice them for more of your fucking ships. We'll show you cunts what fate awaits the idiot cunts who dare to fuck with the north and with the northerners. Theo and Hugo turned around to face the warriors and clansmen of Clan Val. What makes the snow melt? Shouted Theo. Blood. Blood. Blood, they roared as they waved their swords, axes and hammers or bashed them against their shields. What do northern warriors do? Shouted Hugo. Kill! 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 They bellowed in reply. The archers fired 3 more volleys on the Ironborn as more climbed down or jumped from their ships. The North remembers. For the North! Ned shouted as he lifted ice up high for all to see. Theo raised his axe up high alongside the Ned. Fuck Ironborn! For the North, roared Theo. Kill! 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 Chanted the clansmen of Clan Val as they bashed their weapons against their own shields. In spite of his age, Theo loved charging down on the Ironborn and pirate squids. This is the true life of a Northerner. To live is to fight, kill and die against all enemies of the North, Theo thought as he swung his axe around at the closest Ironborn whom took up an axe and shield to face him. Theo's axe had beheaded the man before he could even hold his shield up. He split a man's head in half with his axe as he moved on. He eviscerated another's belly with his axe when he buried it into his belly. As he pulled his axe out, his guts spilled onto the blooded sands, like fish from a fishing net. Theo thrust the spear of his axe's head into another, impaling an Ironborn through his face. He pulled it out and beheaded another. Theo lifted his axe up high to his side when he saw 3 more Ironborn running at him. Theo swiveled around, his feet spinning on the sand, as his axe spun around and smashed the 3 Ironborn down. Theo bashed another in the face with the stave of his axe and battered his nose as he did so. As the man stunned by the blow fell back a few steps, Theo lifted his axe up high. He rained it down onto his exposed upper body. Theo had to wrench his axe out thrice before his axe was free of the man's corpse. Come on, lads. Fight. What is dead never dies, was heard from a ship which shivered Theo from the sight of it alone. The ship was painted blood red all over as opposed to dark grey or black as all Ironborn ships were. The crew all held axes, swords, spears and shields, but none were shouting, jeering or laughing. They just stood there in terrified silence. The ship's figurehead was that of a maiden made of iron and whose mouth seemed to be sewn shut. The silence. Standing on the prow of the ship was a man wearing scaled armor as black as his sails and wielding a large axe with his right hand. An eye patch covered his left eye. His other hand held a goblet. He drank from it before throwing it behind him. You're on the Crow's Eye. The Crow's Eye jumped down from his flagship, slicing down a northern warrior as he did so. But as he held up his axe with both hands, was when the Ned took a hold of his horn and blew long and hard on it. Theo laughed when he saw Roose Roswell leading the charge of the northern cavalry down the beach and onto the surprised Ironborn. Fucking Ironborn scum. The North belongs to neither Southerners nor to your fucking salty pirates. Theo bellowed before chopping an Ironborn in half below the waist. Theo turned to see a ship bearing red sails with a bone hand on it, the colors of House Drum, make landfall. Dozens of Ironborn jumped down to join the fighting. Theo chopped one's head off before burying his huge axe into the spine of another. He chopped his axe down onto the shoulder blade of a third. His axe ripped his shoulder from the shoulder blade to his sternum. Theo tugged his axe away and then sliced up from under at another. His axe cut the man from his balls to his belly. He collapsed after Theo pulled his axe out and turned to see a large Ironborn warrior wielding an axe, almost as large as Theo's. He swung his axe around, splitting a Winterfell soldier's head open before chopping his axe onto the spine of a Dustin man at arms. Theo swung his axe across at his chest. The large Ironborn had large and powerful arms. His youthful face made Theo think he was half his age, if not younger. He blocked Theo's axe with his shield, which bore the sigil of House Drum on it. Ironborn fucker. Theo roared as he punched the unsmiling hard in the face. Puny Mainlander, growled the unsmiling man. Theo swung his axe onto his shield, hard. He blocked it and parried it across before swinging his own axe onto Theo. Theo freed his axe from his shield and blocked his axe with it before kicking him hard in the chest. He fell back a few steps before Theo rained a few powerful blows onto him. He crushed his axe onto his shield a fourth time before his shield was freed from his hand. Theo swung his axe at the unsmiling man once more. He blocked it and pulled Theo toward him. Theo laughed at him before headbutting him. As he recoiled from the blow, Theo stomped his foot on the man's unprotected heel. He screamed as he fell to his knees and Theo disarmed him of his axe with a powerful swing and kicked him down onto his back. My great-grandson fights better than you Ironborn cunts. Theo roared as he lifted his axe up high and chopped it down onto the Ironborn's head. His head was separated from the rest of his body as Theo's axe buried itself in the blooded sands. As Theo wrenched his axe free of the sands, he heard a cruel and guttural laugh behind him, where he could see over a dozen northerners lying dead around the crow's eye whilst the Ned stood before him. "How is your faith in your trees and twigs today, Stark?" sneered the crow's eye. "Come and see for yourself with your other eye, before I carve it out," Greyjoy said Ned as he held ice, very blooded already. He swung ice at Greyjoy, whom skillfully blocked it with the stave of his axe. The crow's eye lifted his axe up high and rained it down on Ned. Ned dodged the axe and swung ice at his upper body. The blow forced the crow's eye back and took one of his shoulder pauldrons off from his armor. The crow's eye smashed his axe across at Ned, whom blocked the blow before cutting at Greyjoy's arm. He grunted as he watched his own blood flow from his arm and onto his armor. He snarled as he faced Ned again. Euron Greyjoy roared as he spun around and smashed his axe down onto the Ned of the Starks. Ned blocked the axe expertly before chopping ice down onto the stave. Then he thrust ice up at his face. Theo grinned as he listened to him scream. He dropped both halves of his axe and reached for his bleeding face. Did he hit his good eye? Well done, Ned. Ned finished him off with a powerful slice to his head. He chopped both hands and head off of the hated usurping king of the Iron Islands. Theo roared victoriously at seeing the Ironborn leader fall at the hands of Ned. He smashed his axe at another Ironborn, knocking him down onto his back. His next blow chopped him in half above his waist. The Northerners all began to cheer at the death of Euron Greyjoy. All whilst the Ironborn began to shout and surrender. "The king is dead, and the crow's eye has fallen," was heard all over the battlefield. "We've done it. The only ones whom will ever call the North their home is the Northerners, not the fucking Ponzi Southerners nor the pirates of Salt and Iron." Notes: Battle of Rilshore is based on the Battle of Marathon, between Athenian Admiral Themistocles and King Darius of Persia. Chapter 52, The Truth Dawned. Chapter text. Garland v. Lord Tyrell, "What news is there from Lord Rowan?" asked the Hand of the King. "My Lord Hand, Lord Rowan has led 30,000 reachmen into the Stormlands and marches directly for Storm's End. He intends to build as many siege weapons as possible to take the castle by the end of the moon, he has assured me," replied Father. "Trying to achieve what you never could in Robert's rebellion, Father," Garland thinking what everyone else was already thinking, he felt. "What of Storm's End's access to the sea, Lord Tyrell?" asked Kevan Lannister. "A fleet of House Grimm sails for Storm's End to blockade them in," Sir Kevan said. Father. "Good. Now, how soon can we expect Sir Baelor to arrive with the remainder of the armies of the Reach?" asked Tywin Lannister. "Sir Baelor should be here within a moon, my Lord Hand. Due to the enormity of his army, it will be most unlikely that the enemy would dare to try and attack," said Father. Ever since the Battle of Brindlewood saw the defeat of an entire army of reinforcements, Tywin Lannister had given the order for all reinforcements to arrive at Duskendale by sea. He had been furious that the Arryns had struck so far into the Crown Lands without his knowing. But now, their troops in Duskendale numbered 85,000 men, including survivors of the Battle of Brindlewood as well as sellswords from across Westeros and Essos. But the armies that Garland was certain could end this war once and for all, were delayed by the campaign into the Stormlands. "Once Uncle Baelor arrives, we will number 115,000 men. We have little to fear from the enemy, even if they do bring the Golden Company and the Dornish armies into this war. The Northerners will soon be distracted by the Ironborn invasion before they can face us. My Lord Hand, once we are joined by my Uncle Baelor, what move shall we make?" asked Garland. "That would depend on the reaction of the Northerners to the invasion of Euron Greyjoy and his Iron Fleet, Lord Garland. Now, the last my spies reported to me of the North, they said that their reserves numbered perhaps between 10,000 and 15,000 men, half of what would face the Ironborn if they were united. The Northerners will all panic at the news of their homes being invaded and their families being attacked by the Ironborn. And they will be forced to choose between fighting for Aegon Targaryen against us or fighting to defend their homes and families against the Greyjoys. And once they have dissensions from the Northerners in their ranks, that is when we shall make our move on the enemy and crush them once and for all and at least bring peace to the realm," Lord Garland said. The Hand of the King. "A fine plan, Lord Hand," Father said. "Father, please, for the patience of the Crone, stop talk like a lickspittle, especially in front of your bannerman. And what news has there been on the enemy's numbers, my Lord Hand? Asked Randil Tali. Sir Adam, asked the Lord of Casterly Rock. The heir to Ashmark spoke up. My Lord Tali, the enemy's numbers, with Dornish troops added, number at least 80,000. Though I do not know if those numbers will stay true once reinforcements arrive from the Vale or when the Northerners march home to the north, said Sir Adam. All sounded reassured at the news of the enemy. Garland was particularly reassured. Gods, I hope this war ends soon. I don't want to be away from Leonette for too long. I want to be back home in White Grove and at her side and for us to have a family together. Willers v. To Willers, my dearest son. Per your father's request, I believe I have found a suitable bride for you. Tala, the eldest daughter of Randil Tali, is a pretty and clever girl. Having met her and her sisters in Highgarden today, I think she would make a splendid lady of Highgarden one day at your side. I hope all is well in the capital. The last of the armies of the Reach march now, with your uncle Baylor marching for Duskendale and Mathis Rowan marching for Storm's End. I pray that all this war ends soon, for our family to return home, for Margaery to be wed and to be queen and to see you wed. Yours sincerely. Mother. Tala Tali. I never would have considered her. I guess, father might have looked amongst the other Lord Paramounts for a bride, as opposed to satisfying his bannerman with a marriage to one of them. Well, at least with this news, Tanda Stokeworth will stop trying to invite me to dinners and impress me with lollies. Since being appointed Master of Laws, Willers felt his job wasn't made easy with the Goldcloaks enforcing the law on the populace of King's Landing, including their own laws, which saw them extort from small folk in the name of protection or in the name of made-up taxes. And then there was the man whom brought the proposal to father and to grandmother. Willers remembered all that Loras had told him of Baelish before he had left for the capital. He remembered how he was a corrupt and cruel man whom controlled the Goldcloaks and was using the coin Eddard Stark had made in his time as Hand of the King to hire sellswords from across the narrow sea. But most of the time, Willers found he was more of a liaison between the Iron Throne and House Tyrell rather than Master of Laws. Willers finished writing a report for the small council, in which he had hoped to curtail the power of the Goldcloaks by having the more disciplined Redcloaks train and equip a militia made of the refugees whom had fled their villages in the Crown Lands in the immediate aftermath of the Battle of Brindlewood. And the most recent news from the Crown Lands was not good. The news was that rather than support Joffrey, Houses Valerian, Celtigar, Barrowman, Sunglass and Chittering all declared their armies and fleets for House Targaryen. Whilst both Joffrey and Cersei wanted them all crushed, root and stem, Tyrion advised against it, saying that they needed all available troops and ships to defend the capital. Willers walked to the Tower of the Hand to bring Tyrion Lannister his report. Out of all those he had met since coming to the capital, Willers enjoyed his company with Tyrion Lannister the most. For his humor and his sharp mind and tongue. As he reached the Hand Solar, he found his squire standing outside, Pardrick Payne, alongside a knight of the Kingsguard. He recognized him as Sir Preston Greenfield, one of many whom Queen Cersei had appointed, not for his skill at arms or for his honor, but for no other reason than he was loyal to her. The only one capable of protecting her son, the king, for when it will truly matter, will be her brother, and yet he is a prisoner in Riverrun. Might I enter? He asked Sir Preston. Her Grace says none are to enter whilst she speaks with the Lord Hand, he replied sternly. Very well, Willers thought as he looked around for something to sit on. Pardrick Payne left his place and pulled a chair from a nearby room. He set it down next to Willers. My thanks, Pardrick, Willers gratefully said before sighing as he sat down. My lord, replied Pardrick with a nod. Gods, I hate stairs. I'm not the one letting him abuse whores and small folk whom annoy him for petty reasons. Willers stifled his nose in disgust as he remembered witnessing a good man of a village of the outskirts of King's Landing come to the Red Keep to beg an audience on a land matter. Joffrey, angered by the news of the Battle of Oxcross, had him beaten and humiliated in front of the court before Tyrion had him safely removed from court. Why do we let Margaery marry this monster? I must tell grandmother. We cannot let Margaery marry this little prick. If he and Margaery wed, he will make her life miserable. Not even father would want that. Do you think I haven't tried? All I know is that it's hard to tighten your leash on a dog when you put a crown on its head, said Tyrion. Come now, Tyrion, that's unfair. To dogs, whom are lovely, trustworthy and sweet creatures. Comparing dogs to the rabid lion cub on the Iron Throne, is almost as cruel as the king himself. Is it any wonder that Stannis never wanted his own children brought to the capital out of fear of what Joffrey might do to them? You speak nonsense. He never would have harmed them, said Cersei. Like how he skinned Tommen's kittens and beat him. He's skinned kittens. And he's beaten his own brother. That's it. I'm writing to grandmother tonight and telling her of this. What is to be done once Mathis Rowan takes Storm's End? Asked Cersei. Shireen and Fortis are brought here as wards and the armies of the Stormlands are brought to the war, said Tyrion. Tommen can be named Lord of Storm's End and marry Shireen, she suggested. I think that's unwise. Especially when the last Varys heard of him, the last of your good brothers is still alive and well. Algirdas is currently in the Summer Isles, having killed Aegon Rugaria, said Tyrion. Algirdas is not a threat. He's as likely as Robert to fight the Targaryens once he hears that Renly and Stannis were killed by Targaryens, said Cersei. And if he should find out the truth? If he does, Algirdas will kill Littlefinger and side with the Targaryens. What? Littlefinger killed Renly and Stannis? Then that means he guaranteed our siding with the Lannisters for Margaery to be queen. But what does he gain out of this? He will not discover the truth. He is as volatile and easily angered as Robert ever was. He will be a useful ally, said Cersei. He won't when he finds out that Mathis Rowan marches on the Stormlands. Long has he hated House Tyrell. When he finds out that they have sent an army to Storm's End, he will kill them all. And then there goes any hope for an alliance and for the armies of the Stormlands to join us. He is a battle-hardened warrior and commands an army that has won many great battles across Essos. What hope do you think any army of meager reachmen have against such a man, whom already hates the Reach and House Tyrell with a burning passion? Willers remembered meeting Donal Noye and hearing him describe the Baratheon brothers on his journey to Castle Black. Robert was the true steel. Leave it on a rack for too long, and it will rust. Stannis is pure iron, black and hard and strong, yes, but brittle, the way iron gets. He'll break before he bends. Renly, that one, he's copper, bright and shiny, pretty to look at but not worth all that much at the end of the day. And as for Algirdas, he's Valyrian steel. Beautiful to look at, but a mere mask for his capabilities. He's forever sharp, forever strong, forever dangerous, relentless and always leaves a mark wherever he goes. Cersei at last left the Solar when they agreed to leave the matter up to father. As she and Sir Preston left the Tower of the Hand, Willers handed his report to Tyrion. I'll speak to Sir Jacelyn by water this evening about gathering a militia to better protect the city, Tyrion assured him. As Willers struggled down the Tower of the Hand, he thought about what he had overheard and sending all the information and the truth of Joffrey's usual behavior to grandmother. Chapter 53, The Storm Comes. Notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Chapter text. Interlude XXV, Game of Thrones 101, Brienne of Tarth's long wandering journey around Westeros, photos, the Wrap. Brienne of Tarth, Gwendoline Christie. Brian, how does it look? Asked Lady Shireen. It doesn't look good, my lady. Rowan's army are certain to attack soon, said Brian as she looked down from the battlements and onto the army of Mathis Rowan, numbering 15,000 men. Sir Courtenay, how much longer do you think we shall be able to hold? Asked Shireen. With the army of Storm's End here, my lady, we might be able to stand a chance for a week. But once the rest of Rowan's army comes, we will be overrun, said Sir Courtenay. Why hasn't their army come? They brought 30,000 men into the Reach, why not bring all of them here, wondered Sir Argilac Wensington, the captain of the Baratheons' household guards and brother to Rugger, the steward of Storm's End. If I were a betting man, Sir Argilac, I would think that they keep half of them here and the other half stationed in the center of the Stormlands in case any of the Bannermen leave home and march to relieve Storm's End, said Sir Courtenay. Brian looked to her charge, Shireen. Since the murder of her fathers and of Renly, Brian swore to the mother that she would protect Shireen and Fortis. And Shireen had proven herself very capable of leading, Brian could see. She had effectively fortified Storm's End into a fortress since they received the bodies of Stannis and Renly. Her regency for Fortis had seen her named the Storm Maiden by the small folk, whom saw her as a brave and stalwart opponent of the Lannisters and Tyrells, and whom would never yield to those whom murdered her father and uncle and those whom now besieged Storm's End. Many maiden girls her age, at 4 and 10, fussed about looking pretty for feasts, dancing lessons, sewing beautiful dresses, or admiring handsome knights jousting in a tourney. But not Shireen, for which Brian admired her. Ever since her other uncle, Algirdas, had entrusted her with restoring and building Summerhall, she had proven herself a very capable administrator and logistician. But as Brian followed her as she towed the walls of Storm's End, in spite of the unyielding mask she wore for the admiring garrison of Storm's End, Brian could see how worried and scared she was. He will come soon. The war in the Summer Isles shouldn't be taking this long. They looked down from the walls above Duran's Point at the dock, 150 feet below, and at the fleet of ships bearing the colors of House Grimm of the Shield Islands. A horn blasted from the front gate, a horn which all of Storm End had grown accustomed to hearing. "Is this it?" Shireen rhetorically asked as Brian followed her back to the main gate. As they arrived, Brian could see a force of a few thousand men, whom marched with a large battering ram as well as ladders. Well, at least they can say that they didn't at least try, when Mace Tyrell couldn't take Storm's End in a year. My lady, said Sir Courtenay, panting as though he had been running. Yes, I can see, Sir Courtenay, said Shireen. No, my lady. The Grimm ships. They are under attack, he said. What? They turned and Shireen and Brian looked to see numerous Grimm ships were burning. But Brian couldn't see any ships attacking the enemy ships. Who is doing that, wondered Sir Argilac. Uncle Algirdas, said Shireen. But, my lady, we don't know if he is here, said Sir Courtenay. No, Sir Courtenay. He is here. I know it, she replied with certainty. Brian looked around before she caught sight of Eleni's beach, where it was rumored that Duran Godsgrief had first met the daughter of the sea god and goddess of the wind. There, even from a mile away, she could see over a dozen boats make landfall. My lady, look, said Brian. Shireen looked at where Brian was pointing. And for the first time since the siege began, Shireen smiled. Uncle Algirdas. Algirdas led what couldn't be more than 500 men and he marched them towards the King's Road. Sir Courtenay, command all archers to fire on the enemy. Give them their due for daring to come here. And raise all flags of House Baratheon. Let's show them a defiant flag of House Baratheon, she commanded. She had commanded with such grace, such strength and such resolve, Brian noticed with admiration for her charge. She is a true Baratheon, one whose thunder would make all her enemies tremble. Interlude XXVI, the One Ring on X, for reference, this is Simon Merrill's. Looks like a shipwright to me. https://t.co/z9ffaf8kd6/x. Mathis Rowan, Simon Merrill's. This will make Mace Tyrell a bitter and jealous fool. And at least this way, he cannot steal the credit from me here. He stole the glory of the Battle of Ashford from Randil Tarly. And he stole the glory of the Battle of Fair Isle from Paxter Redwine. But he cannot steal my glory from me here. That in 1 moon, I accomplished what he could not in an entire year. Mathis Rowan thought little of his liege lord or his ambitions to be hand of the king, for his daughter to be queen and for his grandson to one day be king. But as Lord of Golden Grove and head of House Rowan, Mathis was honor bound to obey his liege lord and follow all his commands. He looked at his bannerman, Sir Thaddeus Webber, leading the token force of 3,000 men marching to begin the siege in earnest. In spite of all the so-called Storm Maiden has done to prepare, there cannot be more than 3,000 men inside the castle. Once Sir Thaddeus either gets the gates opened or the ladders breach the walls, the rest of my army shall storm inside. Failing that, the trebuchets are still under construction. Glory for our house, that is what we win today, Ryland, said Mathis. Yes, father. One which the Tyrells won't be able to steal from us, he said. He may have his head in the stars and dream of glory and marrying a beautiful maiden lady as little boys do, but he is capable with a sword and a lance. This war should harden him from a milksop and into a man worthy of being Lord of Golden Grove when I am gone. My lord, look. Mathis turned to his guard captain, Sir Luther Hestin, and saw where he was pointing at. Who in the 7 hells is that? Ryland wondered. Mathis looked at this tiny force of what couldn't be more than 500 men, and saw that they marched under the banner of the Baratheons of Storm's End. Something's wrong. They couldn't have snuck out, otherwise Gut Horgrim would have spotted them. But why do they attack with so few men? Do they intend for them to die as martyrs? Charge, was shouted from the head of this small force. They charged straight towards Sothothus and his men, whom were already alerted to the danger. Arrows were already shooting at them from the castle. "Father, we should send reinforcements," said Ryland. "Reinforcements? Against only a few hundred men? Sometimes I think you need a beating and not your whipping boy," Ryland Mathis sneered. But what happened next, when Mathis turned his head back to Sothothus, he wasn't at all expecting. Within moments, Sothothus and his men were overrun. They were slaughtered as they broke through the shield wall they had just formed. "My lord." Mathis turned to Sir Luther, whom pointed at a rider riding toward them. "My lord, the Grim ships are retreating." "Retreating?" Mathis demanded. "Yes, my lord. A quarter of them caught fire when burning fishing boats sailed straight into them. Then the rest were forced to retreat by foreign warships," he said. "Foreign warships?" asked Ryland. "Under what banner?" asked Sir Luther. "The Baratheons of Storm's End, my lord," he replied. "Algerdus? He's here. With his renowned storm company and a fleet of his foreign friends, no doubt." Mathis turned and saw Sothothus and his army killed whilst the garrison of Storm's End all cheered. And then came a lone rider from the men whom had slaughtered thousands of Mathis men. He rode Sothothus' horse. He wore blood-stained steel plate armor, with at least 3 arrows sticking out of it. He wielded a bastard sword in one hand and a battle axe in the other. Both his weapons were stained with blood. And the man himself had raven-black hair and dark blue eyes. Algerdus Stormborn. Come on. Who wants to be the next to die? Or is this not an army, but a rabble of small folk? Does a mob of cowards stand before me? Mathis drew his sword. But what stayed him from giving a command was when he saw more men land on Eleni's beach, thousands more. "Come closer, and you'll find no coward Stormlander. Not beneath the walls. And not behind the walls," he roared. "Father," said Ryland. Mathis looked to see him point at the men. All looked stunned and frightened of the Baratheon sellsword whom rode fearlessly and recklessly around, taunting them as he did so. "Come here, and die like men, or run like cowards. Come and I'll send you to the 7 hells, or run and live to be cravens." Mathis was infuriated by his goading. But then he turned back to his men when he heard officers try and keep order. "Get back to your positions." Mathis turned to see many of his men run. "You fucking cowards." "My lord?" asked Sir Luther. Mathis knew he couldn't take Storm's End. Not here and not now. Not when the Baratheons were reinforced by an army of battle-hardened sellswords and led by a man whose legend told of many victories across the known world. "Signal the retreat," he replied furiously. Algerdus 18. Storm's End is saved. Algerdus was overjoyed at saving his boyhood home from Mathis Rowan and his army. He had promised himself and had promised Shireen that he would come and that he would rout Rowan for daring to cross into the Stormlands. For Algerdus, this was more than just saving his home and his family. He had avenged a humiliation and degradation inflicted on House Baratheon and the Stormlands by the Tyrells of Highgarden. But this is far from over, Algerdus thought as he watched as his own men were taking all that was useful from the dead Reachman. Tor Owen ripped his throwing axe from the corpse of Thaddeus Weber and took a dagger and a ring from the corpse. Algerdus looked down at the arrows impaling his breastplate. He broke the end shafts sticking out with his fists before reaching down and pulling out the arrowheads. He felt the blood dribbling down from where his chainmail was broken from the arrowheads, but the bleeding wasn't heavy. "A fine day for House Baratheon and the Stormlands," Uncle remarked Mark with a beaming smile. Of the 6 nephews whom followed Algerdus into battle, it was only Mark and Edric whom had any pride for House Baratheon. Whereas Tolas and Tymond focused more on knightly virtues and aspiring to be Kingsguard. And as for Robin and Tor Owen, they lived for war, battle won plunder, drinking and feasting. "It is indeed, Mark my boy. And we'll enjoy more such days," said Algerdus before patting Mark on the back. Algerdus looked up to see the gates open and even from a mile away, he could hear the sounds of cheering small folk and soldiers. He smiled at hearing these sounds and knowing he had saved Storm's End from a similar fate that Mace Tyrell had inflicted on them. "Uncle, are you all right?" Tolars asked when he saw the 3 arrow wounds bleeding onto his breastplate. "The breastplate took the worst of it, but it isn't fatal, don't worry. Maester Cresson can look at them later," replied Algirdas. "But now, I must see if they are all right." He turned to his nephews and to Bronn. "I believe we shall be expected in the Round Tower." "Come, let's go," said Algirdas. "I can't believe that we'll be setting foot inside the Round Tower once again. I thought that once we had left for Summerhall, that would be the last we would ever see it," remarked Tymund. "It certainly would be if Aunt Caitlin had her way," Robin pointed out. Algirdas rode with Bronn and his nephews inside the seat of House Baratheon, and as they rode through the streets, they were greeted by small folk and soldiers cheering for them and cheering the Baratheon name. Algirdas raised antler and forked fury up high. "Never again will House Baratheon or its subjects suffer humiliation from the Flowery Reachman," he proclaimed. A proclamation well received by the people of Storm's End. They arrived at the Round Tower, and upon arriving, Algirdas smiled. He beamed as he looked at all of the familiar sights. Of where he trained as a boy. Of where he stole his first kisses with serving girls and handmaidens to Caitlin. Of where he first got drunk with the sons of guardsmen and soldiers and brawled with them. His beaming smile grew wider when he saw Fortis and Shireen. Algirdas climbed down from his horse, but no sooner had his feet touched the ground when he felt a pair of arms wrap around his waist, accompanied by a voice saying, "Uncle Algirdas." He laughed as he knelt down and hugged his nephew. "Fortis. Gods, you've grown into such a handsome little boy. You're going to be taller than I one day," he exclaimed. "I prayed every day they besieged us for you to come, and you did, Uncle," said Fortis, beaming adoringly at Algirdas. "I would never abandon you or your sister to those damned Reachmen." "You're my family and you are Baratheons," said Algirdas seriously before hugging him once again and then turning to his older sister. "Uncle," she said with teary-filled eyes. "Shuri," he said. Algirdas walked to her and hugged her. She held on to him tightly, as though afraid of losing him. "It's all right, my girl. I'm right here," he whispered. "I know. I know. I was just so scared," she replied. "No, no. Don't say that. I heard a great many stories, especially from Davos, 7 bless him. All of the indomitable Storm Maiden. There are a great many Baratheons named for the storm in their nature and in their name. But you are above all of them, because you, a girl of 4 and 10, stood strong in the face of adversity, when thousands would think you weak and naive," Algirdas said with a proud smile. "I learned all of that from you." She gives me too much credit. "No. You have always had the traits of a Baratheon. I just wish your father had the chance to see for himself," said Algirdas. But mentioning Stannis was difficult, not just for him, but for Shireen. "Uncle, are you all right?" "The arrows?" she asked, pointing at them impaling through his cuirass. "I'm fine, fear not. They've just cut me a little bit, it's nothing that will kill me," he said to reassure her. "Nothing will stop me from taking our revenge on the Tyrells and making Mace Tyrell rue the day he dared to starve us into submission." Algirdas looked up to Caitlin, whom frowned slightly when looking behind Algirdas. He turned around to see Fortis excitedly talking with his cousins, whom were all smiling and laughing with him and promising to tell him stories of fighting in Essos. "I will have many stories to tell," he and Shireen. Algirdas walked to Caitlin, whom was standing with Maester Cresson. "Caitlin," he said with a nod. "Algirdas. Thank you so much," she said before hugging him. "No thanks are necessary. Family, duty, honor. They may not be the words of my house, but you taught me to value my family and I always have and always will," he replied. "Which is one of the principal reasons why I took all of Robert's true children under my wing, in spite of your personal distaste for bastards." "Did you have to bring them here?" she asked. "Caitlin. This is neither the time nor the place. They may not be of your blood, but they fought to save Storm's End here today. Not for coin as we had fought for in Essos or in the Summer Isles. And I can assure you that they would never dare to try and steal Fortis' birthright. Not when the thieves whom would do such a thing have often been legitimate sons as opposed to illegitimate, if history tells us anything. Now, Take me to them, he said. But you're wounded, she said, noticing the arrow wounds. Damn my wounds. Take me to my brothers, Caitlin. Please, he begged. Caitlin reluctantly nodded before leading him away from the courtyard. They arrived at Duran's tree, a heart tree where Duran Godskreef had laid the foundation stones for what would become Storm's End, in his 7th attempt to build a great castle to protect he and Elenii from the rage of her parents, the god of the sea and the goddess of the wind. And in the ossuary, beyond Duran's tree, was where all Baratheons of Storm's End were buried. She brought him to the tombs of Robert, Stannis and Renly. Theirs were the tombs which had been the most recently interned, their stones were those which had the epitaphs most recently carved. Leave me, please, he begged. She silently acquiesced and left the ossuary. Algirdas turned to his brothers and fell to his knees. He sobbed as he looked at their graves. He reached out to touch Robert's tombstone. I'm sorry, Robert. Gods, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that I was never there for you in King's Landing instead of obsessing with gold and glory. And then he turned to Stannis and Renly. I'm so sorry I wasn't there to protect you both. But, I will promise you three this. I will protect Shireen and Fortis. I will protect them until my last dying breath. I will die before any harm comes to them. And Storm's End will never fall to any tyrant. Not a Targaryen. Not a Lannister. Not an inbred Lannister abomination whom calls himself a Baratheon. And not a Tyrell. Notes. Siege of Storm's End is based on the Siege of Jaffa, between King Richard the Lionheart of England and Sultan Salah ad-Din Yusuf ibn Ayyub of the Ayyubid Sultanate. Chapter 54, From Enemies to Allies. Chapter text. Artos 11. Artos smiled when he could see the walls and towers of Riverrun. He looked forward to seeing Aegon and Aunt Elia. He also hoped that father would return soon and take command of the northern armies, now that Euron Greyjoy was dead and Theon had already gone to take his birthright as Lord of Pike and Lord Paramount of the Iron Islands. Marching to Riverrun, Artos rode at the head of the armies of the north, Dorne and the Golden Company. He enjoyed riding with his brothers, his sisters, his cousins Jon and Edric and his friends amongst the bannermen of the north. But he also missed Rhaenys, Ricard and Allmaria. In the courtyard of the Great Hall, they were greeted by Edmure Tully and Aegon. My friends, Uncle Oberyn, it is an honor to welcome you all back to friendlier territory, said Aegon. And it is an honor for us to come, your grace, said Artos, whom bowed, followed by the other bannermen and officers of the Golden Company. Aegon's uncle was the first to be greeted by Aegon. Uncle, thank you so much for coming, he said. You are family, my dear boy. Neither your Uncle Doran nor I would forgive ourselves if we didn't do the right thing by you and fight for what is rightfully yours, said Prince Oberyn before patting Aegon's shoulder. Inside the Great Hall of Riverrun, Prince Oberyn, his daughters the Sand Snakes, his nephews Quentyn Quintel and Tristan Tristil and all bannermen of Dorne all swore allegiance to Aegon. But it was as the ceremony came to an end that Prince Oberyn asked for leave to speak. Once granted, he gestured to his squire, whom brought a beautifully decorated box. Your Grace, this was uncovered at Prince's Pass several moons ago. In spite of more than a century being passed since it was last worn by a king, it is time that it was worn by a Targaryen king once more, said Prince Oberyn as he opened the box and pulled a bejeweled circlet from it, but the circlet itself, aside from the rubies, was a familiar shade of grey, one which Artos recognized from Ice, Blackfyr and Dark Sister. Gods, no. Can it be the crown of Aegon the Conqueror? A shocked silence reigned supreme in the whole of House Tully as Prince Oberyn held the circlet before his nephew. The long-lost crown of your ancestor is returned to House Targaryen once again, your grace, said Prince Oberyn. Since being named king by father, Edmure Tully and Harold Arryn, Aegon had worn no crown, promising to not wear one until he was crowned king in King's Landing. But now, his squire, Goodliman Diari, took the crown from Prince Oberyn and placed the crown on his head. All hail King Aegon, sixth of his name, roared the great Yonumber. Hail, voiced the lords of the north, the Riverlands, the Vale, Dorne and the officers of the Golden Company. Thank you, Uncle Oberyn, for this incredible gift. I shall be very interested to hear the story of its discovery this evening, said Aegon before he faced all of his subjects. My lords and ladies, as you all know, the tide of the war is in our favor. The Lannisters will have lost their morale from the crushing defeat at Oxcross and the subsequent capture of Casterly Rock and Lannisport. We have accomplished much since the war began, but there is still more to be done. Especially now that Tywin's army is reinforced by all armies of the Reach and armies of sellswords from across the Narrow Sea. Aegon X. The day after Uncle Oberyn had crowned Aegon with his ancestor's crown, lost by Daeron the Young Dragon, Aegon met with all bannermen of the North, the Riverlands, the Vale, Dorne and the Golden Company in Edmure Tully's feasting hall. He stood from his chair at the head of the great table, at which all turned silent and faced him. My lords, now that we are joined by Dorne's armies, we should look to our next moves against the enemy. How many men do we currently number? Lord Mallister, he asked the Lord of Seaguard. Jason Mallister bowed his head after he stood up from his chair. Your Grace, the army now numbers 75,000 men, he replied. And what of the armies of Tywin Lannister and Mace Tyrell? Lord Daery, asked Aegon. The Lord of Daery inhaled briefly before he faced Aegon, as though anxious of his answer. Your Grace, the last my scouts had reported is that the enemy possess an army of at least 100,000 men, he replied. 100,000. Fucking seven hells. I cannot show fear. In spite of inwardly telling himself not to show fear of such numbers arrayed against them, Aegon was unable to show any fear, for as always, he was not good in showing his emotions physically. What of the fighting ongoing in the Stormlands? What is happening there, wondered Aegon. Why have the Stormlands not chosen a side yet? They are neighbors of the Crownlands and the Reach. The door knocked on interrupted the meeting. Enter, said Aegon. It was Maester Vimen. My apologies, Your Grace. A Stormlord has come, bringing an urgent message from Storm's End. He is Lord Davos of House Seaworth, he explained. A messenger come on behalf of the Baratheons. I have heard that it is Shireen Baratheon whom is regent for her brother, Fortis, but what could she be sending the renowned Onion Knight to us for? Bring him inside, Maester Vimen, replied Aegon. He did so and escorted a man, shorter than Aegon, with short and greying hair and beard. He had the look of a man who had spent his life at sea, and wore a leather glove on his right hand. I can remember all the stories about the famous Onion Knight whom saved Storm's End from Mace Tyrell's starvation. He knelt before Aegon. Your Grace, I am Lord Davos of House Seaworth. I come bringing a message from Lady Shireen Baratheon and Lord Algerdus Baratheon. Algerdus Baratheon, the captain of Storm Company, and the man whom killed Uncle Viserys. What message, my lord? Asked Aegon. Regrettably, they cannot come in person, because of the Tyrell armies still in the Stormlands, Your Grace. But I bring a letter bearing their signatures and the signatures of all Stormlords and Lords of the Narrow Sea whom had come to Storm's End on Lady Shireen's invitation, he said before holding up a letter from his pocket. Sir Arthur took the letter and passed it to Aegon. Aegon broke the seal of the stag, but as he did so, he noticed something about the stag on the seal. It wasn't wearing a crown as the Baratheon stag had done ever since Robert Baratheon usurped the Iron Throne. He said they couldn't come in person to Riverrun and they used this seal. Does this mean that they intend to swear fealty to me? He opened the letter. To His Grace Aegon of House Targaryen. 6th of his name. King of the Andals, the Rhoynar and the First Men. Rightful Lord of the Seven Kingdoms. Protector of the realm. Your Grace, on behalf of the Stormlords and the former bannermen of my uncle Renly, we would all gladly swear allegiance to House Targaryen and to renew our fealty in House Targaryen once this war is over. I realize that such words mean nothing unless they are in person. However, war is ravaging the Stormlands and Mathis Rowan commands an army of 30,000 Reachmen. My uncle Algerdus marches an army to face them at Fellwood. Once defeated, he will lead the armies of the Stormlands and his sellsword army, Storm Company, to join with yours and for my brother's bannermen to swear fealty in person. I am aware that you have no reason to trust my house or my family because of what my uncle Robert did in usurping what is your birthright. But I swear to you, by all the seven and on my life and my brother's life, that never again will the Baratheons ever have any claim to the Iron Throne. We eagerly await your reply, Your Grace. Yours sincerely, Shireen of House Baratheon. Regent to Fortis of House Baratheon. Lord of Storm's End. Lord Paramount of the Stormlands. Below the signature of Shireen Baratheon, there was also a list of names of all Stormlords and Crown Landlords, whom all had signed their own names personally. One of which included Shireen Baratheon's uncle, Algerdus Stormborn. Aegon passed the letter to Maester Vimen and gestured for him to read it to the room whilst Aegon thought about this. Could this be genuine? I doubt that they would side with the Lannisters. In spite of the circumstances of the deaths of Stannis and Renly Baratheon, I hadn't commanded their deaths, neither had Rhaenys, mother or Aunt Daenerys. I'm glad that the Baratheons have the sense to know it wasn't us. But do they truly want to forego any claim to the Iron Throne? After Maester Vimen finished reading it, Aegon looked amongst all his lords. What say you, my lords? He asked. Uncle Ned and Roose Bolton were the first to stand up. With only the army of the Stormlands and Storm Company St their command, Your Grace, I find it unlikely that they would try and fight for the Baratheon claim to the Iron Throne, said Roose Bolton in his sinisterly quiet voice. Your Grace, I think that this is genuine. If they are willing to cast aside all claims to the Iron Throne, then it may be that they will swear fealty, said Uncle Ned. And yet they have not come in person to swear fealty to His Grace, Lord Stark Stephen Free pointed out. Did you not hear the part where Mathis Rowan was in the Stormlands with an army of 30,000 men, Sir Stephen? Jasper Redfort asked with ridicule at the heir to the twins. Arguing broke out before being silenced by the great Jon Umber. Fucking shut up, you cunts. Whom would need a herald or a troop of buglers to call for silence when I could have an Umber to silence court sessions? Thank you, Lord Umber. Now, does anyone here have anything to say about Algerdus Baratheon? Asked Aegon. Your Grace, if I may, asked Jon Connington. I speak, said Aegon with a nod. Your Grace, whilst I have long despised Robert the Usurper, it is a hatred I never held to his brothers, especially Algerdus, whom suffered as a boy in Storm's End during the rebellion and was starved for a whole year. And now he has grown up into one of the greatest warriors and most talented commanders in the world, and one whom has never lost a battle. He has a great reputation for winning incredible victories across Essos. I can say with certainty that he is not a man we want as an enemy, but will make an invaluable ally in his cause against the Tyrells. I agree with Jon Connington, Your Grace. I fought alongside the Stormborn at the Stepstones and got a good measure of the man himself. He told me that he hates the Reach and the Tyrells with a burning passion and wants to take revenge on Mace Tyrell for starving his home. So long as he focuses on the Tyrells and the Baratheons prove their loyalty and make amends for the past, then I see no reason as to why they should not be allowed to make amends and be forgiven, said Uncle Oberyn. All others agreed with both Jon Connington and Uncle Oberyn. Aegon nodded as Maester Vimen passed him back the letter. Lord Seaworth, said Aegon. Your Grace, he answered, bowing his head as he did so. Relay the following message to Storm's End, that I accept their fealty and will be glad to see them with us on the battlefield, as soon as Algerdus Baratheon has dealt with the threat of the Reach, said Aegon. Yes, Your Grace, said the Onion Knight. Chapter 55, The Threat of the Reach. Notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Chapter text. Algerdus 19. It is better for Shireen and Fortis to deal with the Stormlords and the Targaryen supporting lords of the Crownlands than I. I was never born for petty politics or for the Game of Thrones. I was born for war. I was born to serve House Baratheon on the battlefield and crush all its enemies and all enemies of the sacred Stormlands. Algerdus sat at his seat in the Round Tower whilst Shireen and Fortis stood before all lords of the Stormlands and Crownlands whom had signed the letter for Aegon Targaryen and sent Davos to him to deliver. And now, he had returned. My lord. My lady. His Grace King Aegon has accepted our fealty, said Davos. All lords and ladies voiced or cheered in approval at the good news. Algerdus steeled his emotions and fixed his eyes on the Lord of Cape Wrath. Was there anything else, Lord Seaworth? Asked Algerdus. My lord, his exact words were that he looked forward to seeing us and our armies on the battlefield, once the threat of the Reach was dealt with and the Stormlands were freed. Yes. Our new king might as well have just gifted me the road to Highgarden itself. A road I shall soon paint red with the blood of thousands of Reachmen and decorate with their dead. Algerdus wanted Aegon to give him the permission he desired to pursue the Tyrells to Highgarden and crush their armies. To take the fight to the seat of the Tyrells of Highgarden and for them to suffer as he had been made to suffer at their hands. House Baratheon will have its revenge. and the Tyrells and Lannisters will soon feel the power of Baratheon fury. Ours is the fury, and mine will be the vengeance. My lords and ladies. Shireen shouted. All quietened down at the sound of her voice raised. In spite of her gender and how it constricted her from what women were capable of, Algirdas was proud of his niece. His niece whom was known as the Storm Maiden and whom had seen Storm's End through the siege and readied the Stormlands for invasion. For this, she was respected by all present nobility. She glanced at Algirdas. Algirdas beamed proudly at her and winked at his niece. Seemingly encouraged, she began. Now that we serve House Targaryen once more, all armies of the Stormlands must muster to restore His Grace to the Iron Throne. But our first priority is to fight the Reach army in Felwood. Felwood, home to House Fell, had been captured to act as a base for the Reach army as Mathis Rowan began his invasion, and it had been where he had left the second half of his army as he besieged Storm's End. Harwood Fell had been killed in the siege whilst defending his home, and his family had fled to Storm's End, having been rescued by loyal household knights. How many troops can be mustered to fight Mathis Rowan and then join the king in the Riverlands? Fortis asked. Good boy, Algirdas thought proudly as he looked at his nephew. 25,000 men can be brought into the war, my lord, said Ronit Connington. And what of the Crown lands, Lord Valerian? Asked Shireen. My lady, we can bring some 3,000 men, but that would leave our sea strength depleted, replied Montford Valerian. How many ships do you command, my lords? Asked Algirdas. 40 warships in total, my lord, and some 20 transport ships, he explained. Algirdas turned to Lord Gillian Swan. And how many ships can the Stormlands sail for the war, Lord Swan? He asked. 20, my lord, he replied. What do you suggest for the war effort, my lord? Asked Caspar Wilde. All turned to face him. Algirdas turned instead to his niece and nephew. Fortis gave him leave to speak. For now, the lords of the Stormlands will gather what troops you can, without leaving your homes undefended. I'll lead Storm Company and the army of Storm's End and take the fight to Mathis Rowan. Whilst we fight him at Felwood, another army, from Bronze Eggett, shall liberate the castle and prevent them from fleeing for Felwood and force them to flee for the Reach or for the Crown lands, said Algirdas. The Storm Lords looked impressed with the plan whilst the Lord of Driftmark spoke up. And what of we, Lord Algirdas? Our homes are under direct threat from the armies of Tywin Lannister and Joffrey the Ill-Born, and we can ill afford to gather our armies into the Stormlands, said Montford Valerian. Nor would I wish you to, my lord. Yours is the most important of tasks, Lord Valerian. From what Lord Seaworth's spies in the capital have told him, the royal fleet in King's Landing has been ferrying armies of sellswords from Essos to join Tywin Lannister at Duskendale. You and your fleets and the fleets of the Stormlands are to intercept them and crush them. Prevent them from bringing any more men into this war and giving them an extra edge over His Grace's war effort, said Algirdas. The loyalist lords of the Crown lands looked satisfied with the plan, meaning that they would neither stray too far from their homes or not take part in the war. When will you march for Felwood, Lord Algirdas? Asked Bryce Caron. Tomorrow. I will lead Storm Company and the army of Storm's End and reach Felwood as soon as possible, he replied. Thousands more Reachmen shall die soon. At Felwood. And then at Highgarden. Intel Uxxei, Vikings, 2013. Guyard Morrigan, Mo Dunford. The Reachmen will pay in blood and death for what they have tried to do to House Baratheon and the Stormlands, Guyard thought as he led the contingent of Morrigan knights alongside the army of Algirdas Baratheon. Guyard had wanted the chance of fighting and making a name for himself rather than gather the armies of Crow's Nest alongside father and his elder brother, Richard. Richard was the heir to Crow's Nest, which Guyard didn't care for. He thought to one day be in the Kingsguard and to learn from legendary knights such as Drold Hightower, Arthur Dayne, and his personal favourite, Barristan Selmy. He hoped that he would earn a reputation in this war as a knight and was glad of the chance to do so, fighting under the command of the esteemed Algirdas Baratheon. As he rode alongside Algirdas towards Felwood, he remembered the conversation he had had with father and with Richard when so many grand tales were being told across Crow's Nest of all of his incredible victories across Essos, from Braavos to Slavers Bay. I've just been to my favourite tavern, father. The Crow's Ale House. And I drank with a few merchants from Meereen who've been telling me tales of how Algirdas Baratheon crushed their army, said Richard. Gods, such tales they tell of him. I tell you, my sons, that with all the stories they tell of the Stormborn, I am quite proud that he is a Stormlander. Father remarked, at which they chuckled. Uncle, Mathis Rowan is marching towards us. Guyard awoke from his memories when Sir Mark Rivers rode towards the head of the army. How many men? Asked Algirdas. Rowan leads his entire army, uncle. 26,000 men, he replied. We number 7 and 10,000 men. I don't doubt his talents at war, but how can we win this? What are your orders, my lord? Asked Guyard. Algirdas looked around the king's road leading to Felwood, when his head stopped and gazed at a wood. We'll have all our infantry stationed in the woods. We'll lure them towards the woods. The trees shall negate the power of the Reach cavalry, and give the infantry an advantage over them. As they press into the infantry at the woods, our cavalry shall form to the east and flank the infantry as they charge towards us, he replied. Algirdas turned to one of his bastard nephews. Taimund, you will lead the cavalry and muster to the east, keeping them well hidden. Do not attack until you hear the signal, he replied. Yes, uncle. What will the signal be? He asked. The sound of my war horn, said the last son of Stefan Baratheon as he held up his prized war horn. That was a treasured heirloom of the Baratheons. Guyard followed Sir Taimund Hill as he led the cavalry, 3,000 knights and horsemen. Whilst Guyard was annoyed that he wasn't granted a command and that command was granted instead to a bastard, he was certain that Taimund Hill was a battle-hardened soldier from how he commanded the cavalry and spoke with a clear and powerful voice, one that was used to giving out commands on the battlefield. Guyard turned to the Westerlander bastard of Robert Baratheon. Have you fought in many battles, Sir Taimund? He asked. I have. 6 battles and 1 siege, Sir Guyard. And if there is one thing I've learnt in all that fighting, it is that the Reachmen will take full advantage of their numbers in fighting us, he said. Are you sure? Will they not plan for battle? Mathis Rowan doesn't have a reputation as a fool who takes risks, Guyard wondered. Perhaps not. But he cares for his honor all the same, as any knight or lord or king does. He will want revenge for the defeat he suffered at Storm's End and want to crush us with one crushing blow. Especially if he wants to earn greater glory for his house rather than ride to King's Landing and beg for help, he explained. So Rowan will risk the lives of thousands of his men for something as petty as pride. They gathered their cavalry behind a hill and Guyard looked from the hill at the wood. He saw Algirdas and the infantry gather at the edge of the woods, with spears, halberds and shields visible as they stuck out and pointed at the oncoming Reach army. Guyard looked amongst the cavalry and spotted a man in rich and finely decorated armor and a white cloak bearing the sigil of a golden rowan tree on it. Rowan. He must have thrice the amount of cavalry we have, said Guyard. Taimund nodded at his guess. I'd say so. And a few more thousand infantrymen than we do, he added. Before either could say anything else, a war horn was sounded from the Reach army. Guyard saw Mathis Rowan pointing a drawn sword at the woods. And all the cavalry began a great charge towards the woods. This is it, Guyard whispered as he reached for his sword. When we win the day, I hope to write and sing of this battle myself. It'll be a glorious song, one that tells of the bravery of the true fighting men of the Stormlands and as a warning that the cowardly flowers of the Reach to never march on the Stormlands again. The cavalry struggled as they broke ranks to charge into the woods. Their charge was halted by the trees and horses neighed and reared on their hind legs as spears and halberds struck at they or their riders. Archers shot down dozens of knights and cavalry, whose horses forced cavalry behind them to halt as the riderless horses stopped. Guyard grinned as the cavalry struggled to break the ranks of the Stormlands infantry and how many knights fell from their horses from spears, halberds or arrows. He turned to Rowan, whom looked at the battle with anger before he shouted commands to his commanders. What is he doing? Guyard wondered. Taimund looked at the Lord of Golden Grove. He is preparing to march the infantry to support the cavalry, he replied. Then we attack as they charge. Guyard wondered. No. My uncle wants them to be drawn into the fighting before they are flanked. If we flanked them as they were marching or charging, they could reform and create a formation of shields and spears, Taimund explained. Guyard gripped his sword impatiently as the infantry charged towards the woods, whilst the cavalry were forced to rout. And as they routed, the infantry began to roar and shout as they charged towards the woods. Get ready, everyone. Lances. Taimund commanded. At last, The charge broke as they were being pushed back from the trees and back onto the grass of the field. And as they were being forced back, by ferocious fighting from the men of the Stormlands and the men of Storm Company. Guyard couldn't help but be awed at the fighting prowess of Algirdas and his bastard nephews as they cut down and killed men in the dozens. A loud war horn was sounded from the front of the Stormlands infantry. A war horn which seemed to stir up the spirits of the men of the Stormlands. From the front, Guyard could see Algirdas stand before his men and shout to them. Men of the Stormlands! You see how these cowards run from us. But will you let them run? After all they have done to us. To the Stormlands. For Joffrey the Ill-Born, they would have burnt our villages, our towns and our castles, ransacked our homes, slaughtered our families and raped your womenfolk. So tell me, sons of the storm, do they deserve your mercy? A great shout of no, was erupted from the Stormlanders. The Reach infantry, and cavalry whom had come to appear on the flanks, all seemed to be frightened as Algirdas gave his speech and now faced an army of furious and patriotic Stormlanders. Tymond grinned as he drew his sword and took up a lance from his squire. At them! Come on! Tymond yelled. His heart stirred from Algirdas' speech and his pride of the Stormlands. Guyard roared as he lowered his lance and aimed it at the Reach knights whom had begun to appear on the enemy's flanks. For the Stormlands! Listen to the storm of our cavalry, fucking flowers! Guyard shouted as he came within a stone's throw of the cavalry of the Reach. His arm shook as his lance impaled a shocked knight. His lance snapped as the knight was pushed from his horse and landed on two soldiers behind him. Guyard drew his sword and sliced down and cut the throat of a spearman as he tried to thrust his spear at Guyard. Guyard stabbed a large soldier whom carried a large Volge. As he collapsed onto his back, Guyard sliced across and stabbed a soldier whom managed to block a blow from one of Guyard's knights. His thrust stabbed into the soldier's neck and shoulder before he pulled it back. The soldier fell to his knees and then onto his face as Guyard looked around keenly for more to fight. He was angry as he watched as Reachmen began to flee, throwing down their weapons. Mercy. You want fucking mercy? After how you invaded my country? You'll get fucking nothing. Knights of Crow's Nest, charge! Guyard shouted, pointing his sword at the fleeing enemy. He charged towards them, alongside his knights. Kill them all. Kill. 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 Kill, Guyard thought with a furious bloodlust. He cut down over a dozen Reachmen before he looked to see Mathis Rowan watch with shock at the remnants of his army fleeing. Retreat. Retreat. Fall back, he commanded. Guyard shouted in hateful anger as the Lord of Golden Grove fled from the battlefield. But as he turned and listened to the cheers of the men, he couldn't help but feel proud. Men of the Stormlands and of Storm Company all roared and cheered as they thrusted their fists and their weapons to the sky. As the Reachmen behind him fled, Guyard panted as he calmed down from the heat of battle. He rode towards Algirdas Baratheon, whom cheered alongside his men, holding up his sword and axe in the sky. A great victory today, men of the Stormlands. One which all the Stormlands shall sing of for years to come. And may the Reachmen never forget today. Algirdas roared. Another great cheer was heard from his men, which Guyard joined in as he admired the Lord of Summerhall. Notes. Battle of Felwood is based on the Battle of Towers, between Charles the Hammer of the Frankish Kingdom and Abd al-Rahman al-Ghafiqi of the Umayyad Caliphate. Chapter 56, A Wartime Wedding. Chapter Text. Daenerys 9. Since giving birth to Roland, Daenerys felt a great joy in spending all of her spare time with him. She beamed at him as he slept in his cot and would frequently kiss his tiny head as he had a bath and found it difficult to let him go as she placed him into his bed. But when her duty forced her to attend court, she would do so alongside Lysa, Sir Alisa and Maester Coleman. Ofttimes she would ride to the villages and towns of the mountain clans, whose homes now had been improved upon by the efforts of lowland builders. She smiled at the children of the clans, whom were fascinated by her silver Valyrian hair and her amethyst violet eyes. But she missed Harold and treasured all the letters she received from him. She said as much when she met with her good mother after putting Roland to bed in hers and Harold's solar. "Have you heard from him recently?" asked Lysa. "Yes, his last letter came 3 days ago. Saying that he had healed a wound he took from the fighting at Brindlewood," she replied. "Where is he now?" "Did he say?" asked Lysa. Yes. He said that he was in Riverrun with Egon, she explained. As long as he is safe and you are too, then all is well. I miss him as well, Dany. But he is Lord of the Eyrie and leads the armies of the Vale in war, said Lysa. Since Harold led the Lords of the Vale in supporting Egon's claim to the Iron Throne, Daenerys was glad. For the chance to restore House Targaryen to what it was before the reign of father and to make it so that it could be even greater than what the Baratheon Lannister dynasty had become and to restore the faith of all of Westeros in the Iron Throne and in House Targaryen. Daenerys rested that evening and woke up the next day, sad as she felt around her bed, to find it empty of life but hers. Not for the first time, she had dreamt that she and Harold were in bed together, but awoke to the bitter reality of Harold fighting in the war. After dressing in a newly arrived dress from Gulltown, one of Myreene's silks and decorated with a pearl-white Arryn falcon on the front and the back, Daenerys walked to breakfast. As she sat down, she began to eat buttered toast and she turned to the head of the table, where Harold would be sat. She then looked down at her necklace he had gifted her before he had left for the war. It was of a pearl falcon and a ruby dragon. She had cried as he gifted it to her and she hugged and kissed him. Promise me that you'll come back to me, she begged. I will, my love. I promise, he said before holding her face with both hands and kissing her and then stroking her hair as they held the kiss. My lady. Daenerys let go of her necklace and let it bounce against her dress when she looked up to see Maester Coleman. Yes, Maester, she asked. A letter has just arrived from Lord Harold. No sooner had Daenerys been about to pick up her fork that she immediately let go and stood up in such a rush, her chair almost fell backwards. Daenerys ignored her chair as Maester Coleman passed her the letter. She broke the seal and unfurled the letter, yearning to read his words and to know that he was well. Daenerys, my love. All is well here in the Riverlands. Tywin's reinforcements have been crushed, as has his reinforcements from the Crown Lands. King Aegon now is gathering our armies together in Riverrun. The Baratheons now swear fealty to House Targaryen, including, I am sorry to say, Algerdus Baratheon. I know that he was the one whom killed your brother, but the king had agreed to his swearing of fealty, including that of his nephew and niece, Fortis and Shireen Baratheon. Now that the Tyrell army in the Stormlands has been defeated, the king hopes to provoke Tywin Lannister and Mace Tyrell and their armies from Duskendale and confront them on what the king hopes will be the final battle to end this war. I love you so much and vow to keep my promise to you. Harold. And I love you, Daenerys thought as she stroked his signature, as if hoping to feel his presence from doing so. Is all well? She woke from her thoughts of Harold and looked up at her good mother. Yes, Lysa. All is well, she replied before handing her the letter. Elyanna 9. Elyanna, you cannot go. Mother insisted. I have to, Mother. Elyanna protested. You are riding into a country at war, said Mother. We did the same as we escaped from the capital for Riverrun, replied Elyanna. The country wasn't at war then. But it is now. And if the Lannisters catch you, Tywin will use you as a hostage against us, Mother said fearfully. Mother, I must go. I love him and will be at his side, said Elyanna. He wouldn't want you to be in danger. Aegon would want you to be safe in Winterfell, Mother snapped as she tried to reach for the reins of Elyanna's horse. But I don't want to be safe. Not without Aegon. Ever since father had defeated Euron Greyjoy at Rilshire, slew Euron Greyjoy and sent Theon to Pike to be anointed Lord of the Iron Islands, Elyanna had become restless, no longer wanting to be in Winterfell, when Aegon was in Riverrun and leading the war. Elyanna was proud for Theon when he had sent word that he was safe in Pike with his sister, Asha, and had claimed his birthright of the Seastone Chair and taken his place as Lord of the Iron Islands, answering to Aegon. And under Theon's leadership, the Iron Fleet was launching attacks on the naval fleets of the Westerlands and the Reach, raiding Lannisport, Case, Old Town and the Arbor. And father had recently left for Riverrun with reinforcements for the army. Don't go, please, Elyanna. Stay here, for my sake and your father's sake, Mother begged. Elyanna sighed with sadness as she looked down on Mother from her horse, and with Lady standing next to her horse, ready to follow her. I'm sorry, Mother. But I cannot stay here any longer, said Elyanna. The great keep's doors to the courtyard opened and Elyanna looked up to see Maester Jellimund and Sir Roderick walk down towards them. Lady Elyanna, will you not stay here? For your mother's sake. Maester Gelimond asked. I cannot, Maester. My place is with Aegon, she replied with resolve. You let Diana and Arya go to fight in this war, Lyanna pointed out. They are both warriors, my lady. They have trained for their girlhood years to be warriors, whilst you have done no such thing, added Sir Roderick. I will have lady with me, Lyanna said. Sir Roderick will accompany you to Riverrun, Lyanna. And you will follow his instructions on the road. Is that clear? Mother stated with a commanding voice. Yes, Mother, said Lyanna. I should be fine. With Sir Roderick and lady by my side, I will be as safe as though I were protected by the best of the Kingsguard, Lyanna thought, reassured. Lady was now a fully grown direwolf, whom was almost as large as Lyanna's horse, fangs almost as long as daggers, and a beautiful coat of grey and white. In spite of being a direwolf, Lyanna loved Lady, for she was the gentlest and smallest of the cubs that Alba had given birth to. Lyanna had loved playing with her when she was so small that she could carry her with one hand. But now, it would take someone as large and as strong as small Janumba to carry her with one hand. Before she left Winterfell, she had sent a letter to Riverrun. The letter told Aegon that she was coming to see him. I pray that he will be all right and that I can see him. Just once before he goes to fight to end this war and end the Lannister scourge. Bellenora 8. The first thing that came to Bellenora's mind when they made landfall in Storm's End was how cool it was. For all her life, she had never once spent a single day outside of the Summer Isles. But now that she and Algerdus were to marry, she felt the climate of the Stormlands couldn't be more different than that of the Summer Isles. At the harbour, she looked around at the scene awaiting her. She could see Algerdus, Bronn, Torwin, Mark, Tolars, Robin, Edric and Tymond standing at the quay and looking at her. And standing beside Algerdus were three people. A woman, a girl and a boy. The woman, in her late 30s and stood proud and graceful in her dress, with beautiful braided auburn hair, high cheekbones and sea blue eyes. The girl looked younger than Algerdus' nephews and whom had the same high cheekbones as the woman, but her black hair wrapped in a bun was the same color as Algerdus, as were her sapphire blue eyes. And the boy had the same black hair and blue eyes as Algerdus, and looked quite like him, but his youthful features, his lack of a beard, his height reaching Algerdus' belly and his cute smile. His surviving family other than his bastard nephews and nieces. Catelyn Tully, his good sister, Shireen, his niece and Fortis, his nephew, Bellenora realized. Xharo held Bellenora's hand and escorted her down from the ship and onto the quay. Bella. How was the voyage? Algerdus asked as he was the first to greet them, beaming at her as he did so. It was peaceful and uneventful. Though it feels so cold here, Bellenora commented as she rubbed her hands together. Oh, this is nothing, I can assure you. In the Iron Islands and the north, that is where it is truly cold, replied Algerdus with a grin before he kissed her hand. Tomorrow night, I hope I can expect you to warm me up, she thought mischievously as he held her hand and introduced her to his good sister, true-born niece and nephew. When she stood closer to Catelyn Tully, Bellenora noticed how the smile she had on her face looked forced. Oh, what have I done to upset you so, Lady Catelyn? Is it my dress that looks so scandalous in comparison to what you ladies of Westeros wear? Or are you another of those Westerosi whom think that when on the Summer Isles, all women are whores and playthings for men? Lady Catelyn, such an honor, said Bellenora as she smiled and greeted her. Likewise she said with her forced smile and uneasy stance. And as she moved on, Algerdus introduced her to his niece and nephew. This is Shireen, Lady Regent of Storm's End, and currently betrothed to Sir Donal Swan, said Algerdus. Lady Shireen. Such a pleasure. Algerdus has spoken so much about you, said Bellenora. I almost dread to think, Lady Bellenora, replied Shireen. Think what? That you look at him as though he was your father. Yes, I see that look, though at least you don't desire him as Rhaenyra Targaryen desired her uncle. And then Shimi Fortis, whom looked shy as he met her. Has he never met a beautiful woman whom he is not related to? Gods, I must have been only a few years older than he when I lost my maidenhood to Salanos, Jalaro and Rala. Gods, what a night that was! As they walked to the great and imposing round tower, Bellenora couldn't help but be impressed by the great and imposing tower overlooking all the land and all the sea. It's no wonder that neither Mace Tyrell nor Mathis Rowan could not take this castle. It looks impossible to take, she thought. What do you think? Asked Algirdas. It has a foreboding charm to it, said Bellanora. He chuckled at hearing that. Foreboding charm? Yes, that's one way of putting it, replied Algirdas. But when do you go to war? She asked. As soon as we are wed, he replied. She didn't like hearing that. But, Algirdas, this war will only end with House Tyrell and House Lannister beaten and blooded. King Aegon is doing that to the Lannisters, but it is up to I to do that to the Tyrells, he explained. Perhaps he is the greatest warrior in the world. But I do not want him to go to war. Not when we are to be wed. The wedding the next day was held in the Storm's End, September. Bellanora was escorted up the Albykes Harrow and she held Algirdas' hands as they stood in front of Septon Garin of Storm's End. You may now bring the bride under your protection, he said. Algirdas took off his Baratheon cloak and held it clasped in one hand whilst his other took off Bellanora's cloak. Because her family didn't possess a sigil as their Westerosi counterparts did, she and Shireen had spent the evening making a cloak bearing a sigil of a swan ship, because of father's involvement in trading as a merchant in the past. My lords, my ladies. We stand here in the sight of gods and men to witness the union of husband and wife. One flesh, one heart, one soul, now and forever. Bellanora beamed as they held hands. He tied a ribbon around their holding hands and said, let it be known that Algirdas Baratheon and Bellanora Summers are one heart, one flesh, one soul. Cursed be he who would seek to tear them asunder. Whilst Septon Garin untied and unravelled the ribbon, Algirdas ran his forefinger up and down her hand, making Bellanora shiver and feel herself going wet. Gods, I can't wait for when we fuck. Once completed, Septon Garin raised his voice for all to hear in the echoing the small September of Storm's End in the sight of the seven. I hereby seal these two souls, binding them as one for eternity. He looked back down at Algirdas and at Bellanora. Look upon each other and say the words. Father, smith, warrior, mother, maiden, crone, stranger, they said together. I am hers and she is mine. From this day, until the end of my days, said Algirdas. I am his and he is mine. From this day, until the end of my days, said Bellanora. With this kiss, I pledge my love, said Algirdas. He leant in and kissed her. Bellanora enjoyed when her tongue fought with his whilst they clapped in the background. When we are in bed, he is the stronger, but when we kiss, my tongue is the stronger, she thought. Chapter 57, The Seven Hells Shits Out Valerius. Notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Chapter text. Interlude Xxxviii, BBC 1, Troa, Fall of a City, Nestor, King of Pylos. Montford Valerian, Peter Butler. My lord, the enemy fleet has been sighted, said Crispin Celtigar, his first mate and the second eldest grandson of Adrian Celtigar. Montford looked around with his Mirish spyglass. Very well. Give the command. We crush these bastards before they can influence this war any further, said Montford. And at last, seek the one true king on the Iron Throne. Long has the Baratheon and Lannister usurpers corrupted King's Landing and forced their own pathetic miseries on all peoples of the Seven Kingdoms. Aegon will set all things right when he is sat on the Iron Throne and is king of the Seven Kingdoms. Montford Valerian came from a long line of sailors and seafarers dating all the way back to 100 years before Aegon the Conqueror's conquest of almost all of Westeros. Though he had reluctantly fought for Robert the Usurper in the Greyjoy Rebellion, it wasn't for the sake of honor or for fighting for the king sat on the Iron Throne, it was for his own sake. To prove that he was a capable seafarer and that he could fight at sea against an enemy such as the Ironborn. But now he felt that he was ready. Now that the true king was taking the fight to the usurpers whom dared to try had murder he, his mother, his sister, his grandmother and his aunt, Montford was proud that he was a part of this war and to fight for the restoration of House Targaryen. His father, Lucerys, had been killed in Robert's rebellion during the sack of King's Landing. He had been murdered by Lannister soldiers when they had reached the Red Keep. And, to insult House Valerian, Robert the Usurper had banned the Valerius from their use of the title of Lord of the Tides, a title claimed by all lords of Driftmark since the foundation of House Valerian in Westeros and since they swore allegiance to House Targaryen. And now that he had sworn his fealty to the true king, he had once again claimed the title for the Valerius, that his only son, Montoris, might one day inherit. Montford walked up and down his flagship, the pride of Driftmark, and led the combined fleet of the Crown Lands and the Storm Lands to intercept the transport ships sending reinforcements to Duskendale. Montfort grinned when he spotted the fleet. It was a dozen transport ships, all bearing the colours of House Lannister, House Baratheon of King's Landing and House Redwyne. "Sir Crispin, give the command." "Capture these ships and kill the crews and reinforcements aboard," commanded Montfort. "Yes, my lord," replied Sir Crispin. Montfort drew his sword as the Pride of Driftmark was rowed towards the first ship from its flank. "Men, these scum side with Joffrey the Ill-Born, a Lannister abomination whom dares to steal the Iron Throne of the one true king. But, we will not stand aside and do nothing as this despicable coward defiles the Iron Throne. We will take the fight to them and we will restore our king to his rightful place. Together, we end the Lannister tyranny. What say you, sailors of Driftmark?" Montfort's mood was elated and proud as his men cheered and roared. His mood soared to greater heights as he looked up the mainmast to see two flags blow proudly in the wind. The uppermost one was of House Targaryen. The one below was of House Valerian. "Prepare to repel boarders," came a shout from this enemy ship. It was a ship bearing the colours of House Baratheon of King's Landing. The name across the forecastle was Sweet Cersei. Sweet Cersei. That is only true if poisonous apples taste sweet before they deliver the intended effect on their victims. Montfort climbed aboard using a rigging rope, and as he landed, he cut down a sailor armed only with an oar. "For Driftmark and for King Aegon. The old, the true, the brave," he roared as he regained his footing. He stabbed a second as he charged at him with an axe. As he pulled his sword out, he looked up to see the captain giving commands to his first mate from the quarter-deck. Montfort ran up the steps to the quarter-deck. The first mate ran at him with a sword. Montfort dodged his blow and sharply elbowed him in the stomach. He groaned sharply from the blow delivered from Montfort's armoured elbow. Montfort proceeded to cut him down with his sword before turning to the captain. The captain pointed his sword at Montfort and sliced across at him. Montfort blocked with his sword before drawing his dagger and stabbing him in the throat. Montfort looked down from the helm and saw the ship was his. He held his sword up and cheered alongside his crew as they cheered at the victory. Then he turned around to see the rest of the enemy's ships had also been captured. Excellent. But that was merely the first part of the plan. Now comes the second part, which shall be just as difficult. They brought the captured ships with them to Driftmark and then, under cover of night, sailed for Blackwater Bay. Whilst they had resupplied in Driftmark, Montfort had given the order for all stockpiles of jars of wildfire inside Driftmark to be stored inside the ships they had captured. At midnight, Montfort looked from the helm of the Pride of Driftmark, and he looked out at the royal fleet, all anchored around the harbour. 150 warships and 150 transport ships. Montfort was angry when he saw the banners of numerous reach houses amongst the enemy's ships. House Tyrell has every reason to be loyal to House Targaryen, for it was Aegon the Conqueror whom awarded Highgarden and the lordship of the Reach to the Tyrells. And yet they see fit to betray the rightful king for what? So that the so-called Rose of Highgarden can be a queen. Do the flowers and weeds of the Reach dare to presume that they are above all others? Perhaps awarding the wardenship of the south to another house would remind the Tyrells of where their loyalties should have been once this is all over. This is it. Stop the ship here, Montfort whispered to Sir Crispin. Montfort walked down to main deck and saw Sir Balon Swan, whom had been placed in command. I have taken us this far. It is all down to you now, so whispered Montfort as he looked to the second son of Gillian Swan. We won't disappoint you, my lord, he replied with a nod and turned to the elite household soldiers of Stony Helm. Men, get into the sloop, he whispered. Montfort watched as they sailed their single-mast sloop towards the Mudgate beach. He looked through his mirrorish spyglass as they got onto dry land and began silently killing a few gold cloaks. They reached Blackwater Harbour and they found the lighthouse. Montfort smiled when he saw a lit torch fall from the lighthouse. The chain has been lowered. Get the ships ready, Montfort commanded. He turned back around to see Sir Crispin give commands for the fire ships to have their respective courses set for all points of the harbour, so that few, if any, ships would escape the carnage. But Montfort wanted just one prize from this act. And he turned around to watch as the Ill-Born's flagship had been captured and was sailing for them. King Joffrey's valour, indeed, Montfort thought with a grin. Would be a shame to leave such a beautiful prize ship to burn with the rest, my lord, Sir Crispin commented with a grin. Indeed, Sir Crispin. Indeed, Montfort replied with a chuckle as King Joffrey's valor was being rowed towards them. Now send in the fire ships, Montfort commanded. He grinned as the fire ships were being directed straight towards the Ill-Born's fleet. All aboard were forced to cover their eyes with their hands as the fire ships exploded and set ablaze over 9/10 of the enemy's ships. The rest will burn eventually, Montfort thought with a grin as he lowered his arm and looked at the carnage. We've done what we came to do, Sir Crispin. Set a course for home, said Montfort. Yes, my lord. Willers 6. The traitorous scum destroyed my fleet. And they stole my flagship. My flagship. Joffrey screamed at the top of his voice. Screaming it any louder won't solve this problem, Willers wanted to shout in frustration at the spoiled brat whom was supposed to be a king. None of my brothers or my sister were like this when they were his age or younger. What does that say about the harridan whom gave birth to him? Plenty. Your Grace, this is of course a terrible dilemma. Which is why we shall plan for the war right now, advised Horus. Indeed, Your Grace. Perhaps you should leave these matters to us and inspect the defenses of the city as all great kings would do, added Willers. Willers exhaled with relief when Joffrey nodded as he thought about this. Yes. Yes, Lord Willers. I shall go and inspect the city's defenses, he said with a nod. He stormed from the small council chambers, accompanied by Sir Mandon Moore and Sir Preston Greenfield. Tyrion Lannister winked at Willers before he spoke. The seven hells shits out Valerius with this raid on our fleet, Horus muttered as the small council's doors shut behind Joffrey. The raid on Blackwater was a disastrous blow. One which doesn't just affect us here, he announced. What do you mean? Asked the Queen Regent. Those ships were transporting reinforcements to Duskendale. And with only fishing boats large enough to transport a dozen men, we cannot transport any more men. And the lords of the Narrow Sea will blockade our access to the sea without our own fleet, said the temporary hand of the king. Sir Horus, how many ships could your lord father send to replenish the ships in the city? Asked Tyrion. He can spare 100, Lord Hand. The High Towers can spare an additional 100, said the heir to the Arbor. Excellent. Then send ravens to your father and to Lytton Hightower to send as many ships as they can spare, said Cersei Lannister. I'm afraid they cannot, Your Grace, said Willers. And why is that, Lord Willers? She demanded. Because, Your Grace, the Iron Fleet, under Theon Greyjoy's command, have been raiding all coastal cities and castles of the Westerlands and the Reach, said Lord Varys. Indeed, Your Grace. All ships are needed to protect the Reach and the Westerlands from these raids, added Willers, hoping the mention of the Westerlands would placate her enough, though he doubted that the fleets of the Arbor or Old Town would give a damn about the coastal settlements of the Westerlands when their own homes were under threat from the rampaging Iron Fleet. Then what of the armies of the Reach? Why is it that they are marching for Highgarden? Asked Cersei Lannister. Because, my queen, after the defeat at Fellwood, your good brother Algerdus now marches Storm Company and the army of the Stormlands to Highgarden, said Varys. Cersei Lannister turned with a scowl to Littlefinger. You assured me, Lord Baelish, that after the deaths of Renly and Stannis, that the Stormlands would fall into line and that their armies would be fighting for their king, she accused. I never predicted Algerdus being a problem, Your Grace, he replied, looking smug as he replied. Why are looking so smug, Littlefinger? Humble yourself before your arrogance costs you dearly. And as for predicting Algerdus being a problem, only Donal Noye predicted as such. Well, he and I. He will stop at nothing, especially with an army of less than 40,000 men at his back. Garland 6. When the news had come that Mathis Rowan had been routed at Fellwood and fled for the Reach, father had sent Garland back to Highgarden. Just as grandmother had predicted, having sent a raven to Duskendale, Algerdus Baratheon would gather the armies of the Stormlands and march for Highgarden. To Tywin Lannister's annoyance, father had told Uncle Baelor to command 20,000 Reachmen staying in Duskendale, whilst preparing for the armies of the Reach to march home to protect the Reach from Algerdus Baratheon. Garland was glad that rather than capturing all castles and cities of the Reach, the Stormborn was marching only for Highgarden. Whilst he feared for his family trapped inside Highgarden, he was glad that tens of thousands of innocent small folk across the reach wouldn't suffer from an army of angry Stormlanders and led by a vengeful man whom was leading a war of hatred and revenge against his family and his country. Garlon was glad when he arrived at Highgarden. As he arrived, he saw Mother, Grandmother, Leonette, Margaery and their cousins Eleanor and Megha eating in the dining hall of the palatial keep. Garlon. Gods, it's good to see you. Mother said emotionally as she ran to him. And you, Mother. And you, he replied with a beaming smile before he turned to Leonette. Leonette, he said gently before hugging her and gently kissing her. Are you all right, he asked. It's me that should be asking that, said Leonette as she held his hands. I am fine. We never actually did any fighting soon after arriving in Duskendale, he replied. Thank the gods. I was so afraid for you, she said. It was then that Margaery ran to him. Brother, she said as she hugged him. Oh, Marge, I'm so glad to see you all, he replied with a beaming smile. Come now, dears. Don't swarm him, said Grandmother. No, it's all right, Grandmother, said Garlon. She seemingly ignored him before turning to one of her sworn swords. Whichever one you are, fetch Garlon a chair, she sternly ordered. Yes, milady, he replied before pulling a chair out for Garlon. Garlon sat down beside Leonette at the table whilst Grandmother was sat at the head of the table, which was more appropriate than father sitting there as he usually would, Garlon thought. So, what news is there from the Crown lands? Mother asked. The war is going badly. I don't if you have heard, but the royal fleet was burned in a great raid at Blackwater Bay. Montford Valerian burned the fleet with a dozen fireships filled with wildfire, said Garlon. We did know that. And we have had a threatening letter from that stupid tart, Cersei Lannister, demanding that we send all available ships to serve in the war, said Grandmother. And we can't, asked Garlon. No, dear, we cannot. Theon Greyjoy has succeeded his uncle as Lord of the Iron Islands and has been celebrating his inheritance by leading the Iron Fleet on a series of raids from Windle to Sunhouse. We cannot compromise our naval defences against the Iron Fleet, especially when Balon Greyjoy had been plotting for another rebellion once Robert was dead, until his brother Euron murdered him, said Grandmother. What of the Baratheons? Asked Garlon. Algerdus now has an army of 40,000 men. They have since left the Stormlands and are at present marching directly for Highgarden, said Mother. Fuck. How long before he comes here? Garlon asked with worry. 2 weeks, perhaps, said Grandmother. What of you, Garlon? What has your imbecile of a father ordered for you to do? Grandmother asked. I am to gather as many troops to Highgarden as possible and prepare our defences. It is clear that Algerdus doesn't give a damn about the likes of Golden Grove, Bitterbridge or Ashford. He cares only for Highgarden, said Garlon. As Garlon was eating some food brought for him, he noticed how Leonette wasn't drinking. My love, are you well? He asked. She turned to him, and noticed what he had noticed. She beamed in reply. Dear, why haven't you told him? It's the first good news we have had since the war began, said Grandmother. My love, I am with child, she said. Garlon exhaled with excitement as he hugged her. Gods, that is wonderful. Do you know how long? He asked. Yes. Maester Lomis says in 5 moons, she replied. Gods, let my child be born when there is peace in the realm. I cannot raise my child and live with my family in Whitegrove if there isn't peace. Notes. Raid on Blackwater is based on the raid on the Medway, where Dutch Admiral Michiel de Ruyter burned Britain's Royal Navy and stole the flagship, the HMS Royal Charles. Chapter 58, My Enemy Since My Birth. Chapter text. Robar 8. The white cloak suits you, brother, said Ander with a proud smile. My thanks, brother, replied Robar as he looked at himself in the mirror, wearing the armor of the Kingsguard. Under the king's command, the new armor to be worn by the Kingsguard was to be steel-colored and with a symbol of the crown above an image of Westeros on a map. In the king's current Kingsguard were Lord Commander Sir Barristan Selmy, Sir Arthur Dane, Sir Oswell Went, Sir Lucas Blackwood, Sir Daemon Sand, Brandon Stark and Robar. Though the king had made plans of increasing the number of knights in the Kingsguard once the war was over. The king's mood had improved a tremendous amount, it was clear to see from all in Riverrun, for 3 reasons. First of all, The news had come from Driftmark that Montfort Valerian had successfully destroyed the Lannister Tyrell fleet anchored at Blackwater Harbour in a road with only 12 ships filled with wildfire, as well as stealing the flagship of Joffrey the Illborn. Secondly, with the defeat of the Tyrell army in the Stormlands, under King Aegon's command, Algerdus Baratheon was leading an army of Stormlanders and his famed sellsword company, Storm Company, to Highgarden, which, from the letters exchanged between the king and Shireen Baratheon, the king knew would lure most of the Tyrell army back to the Reach rather than fight with the Lannisters. But thirdly, Lyanna Stark had returned to Riverrun. From his visits to Winterfell in the past, Robar could see that Aegon felt deeply for the Star of the North. And those feelings clearly hasn't changed. Robar could see from how he looked at her and how she looked at him. Robar stood guard outside of the Lord of Riverrun solo whilst the king planned in there with Ned and Artos Stark, Harold, Edmure Tully, Brynden the Blackfish, Jon Connington and Oberyn Martell.